keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
I mean, the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good afternoon to you. Hope you're well. It's 3 p.m. I'm Ben Leo, standing in for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and indeed all across the UK. Sir Keir Starmer's flying into an explosive row over reparations for slavery as rebellious Caribbean leaders are set to force the issue onto the Commonwealth Summit agenda. Will our PM back down, or will we eventually end up coughing up? Elsewhere, Nigel Farage tells every Tory councillor to join Reform now or risk losing your seat, as he says the Conservative Party is doomed. Does he have a point, or is he perhaps a little bit delusional? Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, joins me later in the show, but first I'll speak to a Welsh councillor who's already defected to the party overnight. And a furious backlash at Labour MPs for accusing the media of using racist gang tropes to portray feared gun gangster Chris Kaba, as politicians who backed him are now being urged to apologise. And this year's Royal British Legion Poppy Appeal officially launches today. I'm wearing my poppy, but do young people take pride in wearing them? Cast your vote now on gbnews.com/poll. Thanks for your company this afternoon. It's been a beautiful day in the southeast. Let me know how the weather's been where you are. The sun has been glorious. Not too warm, but I tell you what, at this time of year, I don't really care. As long as the sun is out and it's on my skin, I'm happy. A really big 3 hours coming up. We've got Miriam Cates joining me live on this Mermaids trans charity story. We've got Peter Blexley in about the Chris Kaba developing story, and indeed Richard Tice of Reform UK. And I want to hear from you as well, the viewers. gbnews.com/your say with all your views and comments, and I'll endeavour to get through them as the show progresses. A big 3 hours ahead, but first, your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. It's just gone 3 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Child serial killer Lucy Letby has lost her High Court bid to challenge her conviction for the attempted murder of a baby girl. The 34-year-old, who was found guilty of attempting to kill a newborn, known as Child K, was seeking permission to appeal against the conviction, claiming media coverage had led to overwhelming prejudice. However, 3 senior judges in London rejected her application. The nurse is already serving 14 whole-life orders for the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 6 others. Today's ruling marks her second unsuccessful appeal attempt, following a similar dismissal in May regarding her earlier convictions. Our GB News reporter Sophie Reaper is outside the court in London.
It started today with Letby's defence barrister Benjamin Myers-Casey taking to the stand to set out exactly what their application was about, and it really seemed to centre around the question of fairness. He said the judge who'd presided over the retrial earlier this year should not have let it go ahead because of what he described as overwhelming and irremediable prejudice. Once all submissions had been made, that panel of 3 judges retired, returning only around 20 minutes later, simply stating right off the bat that they were refusing Lucy Letby's application to appeal. They said they felt the judge was right to find that Letby could have a fair trial.
Now, a 6-year-old woman has been released under investigation after her arrest over the deaths of 3 residents at Gainsborough Care Home in Swanage. Police are investigating carbon monoxide poisoning as the likely cause after Gainsborough Care Home residents were evacuated. 7 people were taken to hospital and 40 others moved to safety during the emergency early on Wednesday morning. Health and safety officials have now arrived at the scene with a police cordon still in place. The deaths are being treated as unexplained and tributes are pouring in from the local community. In other news, the government's confirmed a ban on disposable vapes starting from June 2025 amid concerns about their impact on children's health. The announcement comes as 5 million single-use vapes are discarded each week, with their use growing over 400% from 2012 to 2023. However, critics claim the move will drive illegal sales, with the Vaping Industry Association warning there'll be a black market surge. GB News can reveal an imminent rise in Channel migrant crossings, with numbers expected to exceed last year's total within just 48 hours. At least 400 migrants are anticipated to have made the journey by the end of today, following 5 boat arrivals this morning, carrying over 250 people to the Border Force Processing Centre in Dover. A further 3 small boats were seen heading towards UK waters by lunchtime, taking the number of arrivals so far this year to more than 29,000. The total figure for small boat migrants over the whole of 2023 was 29,437. It comes as reckless people smuggling operations have already resulted in nearly 50 deaths this year. The government's being pushed to confirm its position on reparations for the UK's role in the slave trade. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer faces mounting pressure from Caribbean nations at the summit in Samoa. Shadow Commons leader Chris Philp says it's wrong to ask for money for very serious sins committed hundreds of years ago. However, the Bahamas Foreign Minister says justice is about more than money. They say it's about addressing the lasting impact of slavery. Our GB News political editor Chris Hope says it's a ridiculous conversation.
If the cost is anything from 200 billion to 17 trillion, it's clearly a ridiculous conversation. Those figures are far bigger than many times bigger than the amount of money in our UK economy. But if they do look into it further and find a number they can all agree on, that may be a way forward. But of course, as you heard from Nigel Farage, many would say no, no, no. Where does it stop?
Now we'll end with some breaking news to bring to you. It's being reported that Vince McMahon and the WWE have been accused of knowing about and failing to stop the sexual exploitation of young boys by a ringside announcer. In a lawsuit filed on behalf of 5 alleged victims yesterday, they accuse McMahon and his wife and World Wrestling Entertainment of allowing the open, rampant abuse of so-called ring boys as young as 12 between 1980 and 1990. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, I'm Ben Leo, in for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News, who is on a well-earned holiday. I did mention to Tom and Emily, though, he's still tweeting about politics and Keir Starmer and Labour when he should be sunning himself. So, Martin, if you're watching, put your phone down, my friend. Anyway, we move on because it's all kicking off today with the slavery reparations story. Heads of government are set to defy the UK by discussing slavery reparations at a leaders' summit. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, insists calls for reparations are not on the meeting's agenda, adding that he'd rather focus on current challenges such as climate change. He says, though, there's no question that slavery was abhorrent, but he'd rather focus on the here and now than have endless conversations about the past. Well, let's get the latest from GB News political editor Christopher Hope, who joins me now in the studio. Good afternoon, Chopper. It kind of feels like I agree with Keir Starmer, actually. Why are we talking about the past when there's so many pressing issues here and now, although there has been a development in the last sort of 4 or 5 hours or so?
Yeah, there's briefing... Hi, Ben. There's briefing in some newspapers now on social media that the government's looking towards accepting some of the wording in this communique, this agreement by the heads of government in Chogam, which is the Commonwealth heads of government meeting in Samoa with the King at the moment. The draft version, leaked already without any UK input by all accounts, is agreed that the time has come for a meaningful, truthful and respectful conversation about forging a common future based on equity, and they also agreed to prioritise and facilitate further additional research on the transatlantic trade in enslaved Africans. Now, that is going towards talking about a number. The number out there for our involvement in slavery is huge. It's 200 billion at the lowest level to 18 trillion pounds. That's 6 times more than the country is worth, about. That's based on a UN judge called Patrick Robinson, who reckoned that's what we owed for our involvement in 14 countries. Number 10 has said last week this issue is not on the agenda at the Commonwealth heads of government, they said. They said, to be clear, reparations are not on the agenda for this meeting. Secondly, the government's position has not changed. We do not pay reparations. Well, I think diplomatically that was a mistake because it clearly is on the agenda for other countries there. Why is it on the agenda? Because they sense a chance here to push an agenda that many Caribbean countries and some African ones have been trying to push for a while, which is reparations, money back from the UK, from almost this country to because of the slavery issue in the past. They're saying that because you've got David Lammy in the past has said we don't want apologies, we want money. He's talked in the UN, didn't he, recently, saying that his forebears were taken away at gunpoint in shackles. He knows what slavery means. Keir Starmer is a human rights lawyer. So there's an opportunity here which is being pushed by these countries, I think.
Do you think you get a sense, Chopper, that the UK is looking particularly weak at this present time? Because we've just given away the Chagos Islands. So Keir Starmer's had a challenging first 100 days or so in government. Do you think there's a sense from these Caribbean nations that the time is now to pounce?
If you're PM, Ben, you're tested in 2 ways. You're tested by other political moments at home. The press tests you all the time, grilling who's doing what where, who paid for your specs and your suits and your weekend in New Year or whatever it might be. Where did the money come from? That's a challenge domestically, and also when the Tories get organised, they'll be pushing hard over the budget for next week. Internationally, all the countries to start looking at the leader, saying so they push and see where these leaders might go. We saw the handing over of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius on a 100-year lease, of course, but we are giving sovereignty away. That's land. That's a value in this country, in the world. People see that and think, well, where else can we push this young government? And I look at them and wonder why they make some of these missteps, why Catherine Forster, our colleague, asked about the Gibraltar and the Falkland Islands, and it took 5 days for the PM to say in terms they are British and will remain British. So there are some things that you've got to be really firm on. This government isn't. They are trying to be firm on reparations, but maybe a cleverer way of doing it might have been saying, well, we'll listen to what you've got to say and then work out a way forward, rather than saying no, then they look quite weak if that changes through the next few days.
I mean, is there no one, Chopper, from the UK government who can make a case to these nations and say, look, guys, we were the first to abolish slavery. We lost something like 17,000 Royal Navy sailors fighting other nations across the world to get rid of slavery all across the globe. Have we made any sort of decent case to these nations, either now or previously?
Well, not from the Labour government, but one person who is making a strong case is Nigel Farage, who's the Reform UK leader. He spoke to me earlier.
What does Sir Keir Starmer say to Commonwealth countries wanting reparations for our slavery past?
No, never. Now, there is an argument for reparations, obviously. I think the French, during the 100 Years' War, I think the raids into Kent and Sussex, the loss of so much. I mean, where do you stop with this?
Nigel Farage there saying, where do you stop with this? What he was going to go on and say, and there's other groups with grievances about how they're treated through our past, and do you start repaying money to Catholics and other groups? I mean, it's not the same. The treatment of slavery was horrific. Of course it was horrific. But where do you stop dealing with our past? At some point, you've got to move on. That's what Keir Starmer's trying to do, but he's now backed into a corner in what should be a friendly summit. The Commonwealth has a government. It's not normally controversial.
OK, Chopper, thanks very much for that. Again, I make the point, it's a suggestion. This nation was the first to abolish slavery. We spent many, many years and lost many, many good sailors. I think it was around 17,000 fighting to abolish slavery all around the world. How about these colonies in the Caribbean and Africa who want reparations? How about they pay us for the British blood that was shed in oceans all across the world? 17,000 Royal Navy sailors we lost. Anyway, let's get the thoughts now of the founder of the Global Conservative Coalition, Sunil Sharma. Sunil, good afternoon. Do you agree with me that you can't keep living in the past like this? This was many, many, many years ago. And in actual fact, we did pay a lot of money back. The money to certain colonies, we only ended up paying off finally in 2014.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more with your comments and Chris's as well, and Farage's. Look, the reality is there isn't a civilization, there isn't a group of people, a race of people that were not involved in some sort of what we now would call colonial or we now would call slavery. We obviously know in 2024 standards this was awful and should never have happened, but you cannot compare the social norms of 100 years ago to now. And to think that now we're going back in time in terms of to try and repay stuff. A, there is a real judgment on how much money are we talking. B, what about the countries in Africa? What about Egypt? What about Benin? What about Morocco? What about Cameroon? What about these countries who all took slaves from Caribbean and sold them to Europeans? Are we going to ask them for reparations? Are they going to ask those countries for reparations? There isn't a country that we could go on the map through that did not do some pretty, what we call by now in 2024 standards, some horrific stuff. Slavery is still going on right now. I think that would be a much better thing to focus on.
Yeah, great point.
The Uyghurs in China, 1.4 million in concentration camps. Libya even. They have modern slavery. Congo, you could argue some of the parts, the way we get our cobalt for a lot of these electric cars comes from slave labor. These slave manufacturing for all these iPhones and these other manufacturing. Maybe we should talk about those things rather than things that happened over 100 years ago. I think that would make a lot more sense. Instead, I think these countries are sensing a weakness in Britain. And I think when you've got weak leadership, in generally the West, with Biden in America and Sakir here in England, I think when you see weakness, I think naturally other countries see an opportunity to try and capitalize. Yeah. And I think it just shows how important strength is in leadership right now.
Sunil, such good points. Just as you said, look at Libya, a slave hellhole since the French coalition, when there was it 2014, and just bombed the place to pieces. I've seen some absolutely terrible videos online. I do question and I wonder, why don't these colonies, if they're so concerned about slavery, as you have rightly said, raise campaigns or raise awareness about modern day slavery, because it's still going on. And my comments at the top of our conversation with you, it was in 1833 that we used, Great Britain, 40% of our national budget to buy freedom for all slaves in the empire, and we only finished paying that back in 2014, so I don't see what else we could have done. Sunil Sharma, thank you for your time this afternoon. Let me know your thoughts on the reparations issue. It all seems a bit balmy, really, doesn't it? There's so many more pressing issues going on here in the UK right now. Lots of you saying on your say, you just want Keir Starmer, the Labour government, to be firm, to go in there and say, no, absolutely not. OK, we move on. Another story developing on the political front. Joining me now is leader for Reform UK Wales, who defected to the party in the summer. He was a former Tory councillor, David Thomas. David, are you there?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Here he is.
Just have to correct you quickly there, Ben. I was an independent, not a Tory councillor.
Got it, OK. But you have come with the Reform tie. You've got the memo. What do you make of Nigel Farage's rallying cry to all Tory councillors in the UK to pack up their tools and join his party?
Well, I think it's brilliant. And I think if you're a Conservative councillor, this is a lifeline for principled Tories to leave a sinking ship and to join a party with purpose and a party with clear direction for the future.
So you were an independent previously. Had you ever been aligned to any political party?
Yes, I was a Labour councillor in 2017 for my sins.
Ah, interesting. Labour. So what first drew you to Labour, and do you think the party has changed since 2017 to now?
Well, massively. I mean, when I joined in 2017, I joined as a Labour councillor at Torvine Council because that's basically what my family was. We were predominantly Labour voters, and at that point in time, I believed in the party. I believed in their principles. But once inside, I quickly realised that the party was nothing like what I was brought up on, thinking it was a working class party.
OK, our political editor, Christopher Hope, is still here. Chopper, have you got a question?
Yeah, hi David. Christopher Hope here. Just a quick one. Why is Nigel Farage written to 1,352 candidates or councillors in the Tory party? Why can't he find his own people? It's a bit desperate, isn't it, to rely on retreads or defecting Tories rather than find his own quality councillors?
Oh, absolutely not. I don't think that at all. I think what Nigel's done is a very clever move. I mean, the Conservative Party brand is broken. The people have completely lost, Tory voters have completely lost trust in the Conservative Party now, and many of the original Tory ideology Reform stands for. So I think it's a very clever move by Nigel Farage to do this.
It's not desperate. He's got 28 councillors at the moment. I mean, far more interesting is what Reform might do at the next elections in Wales, where they may well get maybe 24 or so members of the Senate. Why not focus on that rather than on councillors?
Well, I think what he's doing is, like I've previously just said, is he's offering them a lifeline to a broken party. The Conservative Party is finished, and there's no shame. And this is the real point that people need to understand. There's no shame in leaving a party that no longer reflects your core values or beliefs. So, or maybe even the core values or beliefs of your constituents. So, staying true to your principles is far more important than any loyalty to a party that's now broken.
Yeah, but David, the likes of Robert Jenrick, who's bidding to be the new Tory leader, he says that he is going to get them back to a centre-right schedule. Leaving the ECHR, surely you can back that. What do you think of Jenrick and his rhetoric?
I don't trust Robert at all. I mean, I don't trust the Tories at all. No matter what they say one thing to get into power, and then once they're in, they're gone. So everything that Robert's saying is I would say, complete nonsense. OK.
Councillor David Thomas, thank you for joining me this afternoon. And Chopper, thank you very much.
No worries.
OK, you can see I'm wearing mine. It's the Royal British Legion's annual Poppy Appeal, officially launching today. Charlie Peters will be in the studio to give us an update on all that's going on that front. I'm Ben Leo, standing in for Martin Daubney on GB News. Back in just a tick.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Millions are struggling to stay warm with the wet weather, the cost of living and, of course, cuts to fuel payments.
Yes, winter is fast approaching, so it's crucial to find cost-effective ways to save on your energy expenses whilst staying reasonably warm.
So joining us to provide advice on heating your home, or at least staying warm somehow, is one of the leading voices on lowering energy bills, Nick Miles. And you are very welcome in here this morning. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, in the olden days, you just used to put on an extra jumper. But actually, it's more serious than that, isn't it? What is the best way, the most cost-effective way, to keep your home warm?
Some of the bigger things is we need to do more things on insulating our properties, but actually sometimes, it can be simple things like turning down a thermostat. Those that have got the luxury of being able to afford energy bills and keep their homes on the thermostat a bit too high, if you just turn it down by
1 simple degree, as long as you keep it between 18 and 22 degrees, can save up to 5 to 10% of your energy bill. So that's a kind of a very simple way of doing things. But, you know, it can be other little tips and tricks you can do as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I always get it when people say about this, but like 18 degrees is not warm for a house.
No, and it's twofold actually. It's that kind of relative temperature, but also it's the kind of drafts and things you have in your house. So it's the comfort factor. So what we have a lot of old properties in our country. You've got some 8 million hard-to-treat properties built before World War II that have got poor insulation, but also very, very drafty. So it's the temperature and it's the kind of the draftiness of them that kind of keeps us uncomfortable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
There you go. You got a sneak peek of me there through the transparent sting. A couple of emails flying in. One from Tom Grattan talking about the reform to Conservative Party defections that Nigel Farage is calling for. Tom, you say, I think Nigel and Reform should be careful asking councillors to defect. After all, we don't want any cuckoos in the nest, so to speak. Remember the dirty tricks from other parties during the last general election. Yes, very good point. But I think Nigel would make the case that they have very stringent entry requirements now. I think they do their research on candidates, on their backgrounds and so on. But yeah, good point. Some could get through the net. Right, let's move on. The Royal British Legion's annual Poppy Appeal has been launched today, and this year the charity is highlighting the mental scars that can result from experiences in military service. Joining me now is GB News national reporter Charlie Peters with the latest. Charlie, we hear so much about physical injuries from veterans in war and those who go on tour, but we sometimes do forget about the impact of the mental cost of military service.
That's right, Ben, and that's the testimony I heard this morning at HMS President out in East London, bright and early, before the sunrise. Soldiers, sailors and airmen were gathering at that location to conduct mindfulness and stretching experiences. I have to say, it was quite a sight at 6 a.m.
Stretching?
Yeah, they were
physical stretching.
They didn't want to call it yoga, but that's very much what it looked like to me. I think we have some pictures we can play for you of the situation. So they went out onto the terrace at HMS President as well, and that stretching continued. There we go. I think it's on the screen now. Yeah, so there we go. Tower Bridge in the background. Really quite a gorgeous setting. It's a great way to start the day.
Brilliant.
And you're raising money for the Poppy Appeal at the same time. That's Ruby, an 11-year-old girl who was fundraising for most of her life so far, in fact, for the Poppy Appeal, for the Royal British Legion. Her dad being a veteran. There's the insignia of the Household Cavalry. Many of their troops were there to get involved in this experience. And as you say, Ben, all this conversation about how members of the armed forces are risking life and limb, but when they lead the forces, many do hide some mental scars. And it's worth pointing out, I think, that soldiers are especially emotionally and mentally resilient people. I think while there is this discussion about mental scars, a lot of people in the forces don't like being put forward the caricature that they're all at risk of PTSD all the time. They're constantly at risk of facing great mental struggle. Actually, soldiers in the armed forces have on average a much lower rate of mental illness than the general population. They are resilient and strong people, but the work they do can bring some risk of additional struggle. And this morning I spoke to that 11-year-old Ruby to ask about the campaigning she'd been doing for the RBL and the work that she was doing to support her dad. Let's have a listen.
Tell us about what you've raised for the RBL and why you get involved with the campaigning.
I was 4 years old raising money for the RBL by collecting glasses in the pub. And then I went on to making paper cards, and over time it's just progressed. It feels good all the time when I'm raising money because I know it's going to go to someone who actually needs it.
Dan, you must be enormously proud of your daughter.
Oh, I'm immensely proud. I mean, I couldn't imagine to do anything like that when I was her age. Yeah, and I mean, she gets up at silly o'clock in the morning and she's working tirelessly on her crafts and puts in so much effort. It is absolutely brilliant.
Wow, Ruby, what a star. I mean, yeah, can you imagine most 11-year-olds, well, maybe I'm generalising a bit, but, you know, to be doing that from such a young age as well, from 4, is brilliant. Charlie, just explain to me what work the RBL does. How does the money manifest into help for veterans?
So the Royal British Legion are focusing a lot on recovery and rehabilitation for wounded, sick or injured personnel and veterans, of course, so those who've left the forces. Doesn't matter if you left yesterday or decades ago, they want to step up and provide that support. So when it comes particularly to this mental scars concern that they're pushing this year, that can include everything from being out of work, having issues with addiction, and just helping people get their life on the level of recovery they want to be to thrive after a career of military service. If you did one day or if you did a full 22-year career and more, they're there for you.
Do you think we, as a country, have got better in considering and looking after our veterans?
I think there was a period right before the Afghan war where people didn't really have the armed forces recovery in front of their minds, but Help for Heroes and other charities, there's no doubt in my mind, that put personnel recovery to the forefront of our national consciousness.
And it's so big in America as well. The way they look after and respect their veterans is to be admired. And we do some good stuff. I've got some, some friends who are in the Navy and so on. They get the veterans discount card.
Right. Rail card's always very nice.
Cards,
yeah,
definitely, in this day and age. Charlie Peters, thank you very much. OK, now, at GB News, we love to hear what you think, of course, and every day we'll be running our poll of the day. Today, we've been asking, do you think the young take pride in wearing the poppy? I'll be bringing you the results at 5:30. For all our latest polls, news and how to vote in this poll, just go to gbnews.com/poll. And can I be absolutely honest here? I don't know what ages we're talking about when we say the young, but I'd be surprised if the majority of the young even know what the poppy is, what the poppy appeals for, what Remembrance Day is for. Maybe, again, I'm just generalising and being a bit harsh, but that's my take from my experience with youngsters. Correct me if I'm wrong, gbnews.com/your say. Lots more to come between now and 4 o'clock, including should Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott and Sadiq Khan apologise for supporting gun gangster Chris Kaba. More on that next. But first, your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. It's 3:30. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Child serial killer Lucy Letby has lost her High Court bid to challenge her conviction for the attempted murder of a baby girl. The 34-year-old, who was found guilty of attempting to kill a newborn, known as Child K, was seeking permission to appeal against the conviction, claiming media coverage had led to overwhelming prejudice. However, 3 senior judges in London rejected her application. The nurse is already serving 14 whole life orders for the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 6 others. Today's ruling marks her second unsuccessful appeal attempt following a similar dismissal in May regarding her earlier convictions. Now, a 6-year-old woman has been released under investigation after her arrest over the deaths of 3 residents at Gainsborough Care Home in Swanage. She was detained last night in Dorset on suspicion of manslaughter, with police exploring carbon monoxide poisoning as the key line of inquiry. The victims, 2 men aged 74 and 91, and an 86-year-old woman, were found dead on Wednesday, and their deaths are currently being treated as unexplained. In other news, the government's confirmed a ban on disposable vapes starting from June 2025 amid concerns about their impact on children's health. The announcement comes as 5 million single-use vapes are discarded every week, with their use growing over 400% from 2012 to 2023. However, critics claim the move will drive illegal sales, with the Vaping Industry Association warning there'll be a big black market surge. And GB News can reveal an imminent rise in Channel migrant crossings, with numbers expected to exceed last year's total within just 48 hours. At least 400 migrants are anticipated to have made the journey by the end of today, following 5 boat arrivals this morning, carrying over 250 people to the Border Force Processing Centre in Dover. A further 3 small boats were seen heading towards UK waters by lunchtime, taking the number of arrivals so far this year to more than 29,000. The total figure for small boat migrants over the whole of 2023 was 29,437. It comes as reckless people smuggling operations have already resulted in nearly 50 deaths this year. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2984 and €1.2014. The price of gold is £2,104 and 46 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,294 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there, welcome to the latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Increasingly cloudy for many of us during the rest of today, with some heavy rain turning up after dark in the west. Meanwhile, it stays drier and clearer to the east as higher pressure slowly pulls away. We've got a southerly airflow. That's a mild direction for the wind, but we're also seeing a steady increase in the cloud coverage across western and later eastern parts of the country. In fact, it turns gloomy in the east, whilst some heavy rain turns up for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest during the early hours of Friday. With that rain and the breeze, it's going to stay mild overnight. Temperatures in some places holding up in the teens. But a murky start to the day, a lot of cloud coverage, some mist and hill fog affecting central and southeastern parts of the country. Some breaks in the cloud, most notably towards Cornwall and parts of Devon increasingly. But this area of rain's moving up through parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts and some tricky driving conditions first thing, I suspect. Some patchy rain into western Scotland and a lot of cloud and some hill fog, but otherwise actually mostly dry, particularly towards the east, where there will be some cloud breaks. But on the whole, it's a cloudy day on Friday, especially across eastern parts of the country where we saw plenty of sunshine through today. Meanwhile, brighter skies emerge towards the southwest, albeit with a strengthening wind and some heavy showers. A slow-moving area of rain moves up through the Midlands, parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. A mild day, but not quite as mild as today because of the thicker cloud and the increasing breeze across some southwestern parts. In fact, the far southwest could see gusts of 40 miles an hour or so. But into the weekend, for many, it's a dry start with some sunshine around. Outbreaks of rain, though, will increasingly affect northwest Scotland.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. We're seeing slow traffic on the M62 in West Yorkshire. Firstly, westbound, the exit slip road is partially blocked at junction 26 Chain Bar, and eastbound there's a lane closed for emergency repairs at junction 25 Brick House. Slow traffic for the M61 southbound in Manchester at junction 1 the Swinton interchange. We're also seeing slow traffic on the M1 in both directions in Leicestershire up to junction 21 for the M69. Still got delays on the M50 eastbound in Gloucestershire. There's a lane closed for emergency barrier repairs following an earlier accident. That's between junction 2 Ledbury and 1 for Tewkesbury. And queues on the M20 coastbound in Kent. There's a lane closed for an accident between junction 4 Leybourne and 5 for Aylesford. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News. Thank you for your comments on gbnews.com/yoursay. Just a very quick one before our next segment from Phil Jones. You said, Ben, any chance of a mention for Royal British Legion North Wales? We're launching the Poppy Appeal this weekend by riding our motorcycles to 11 war memorials around Cheshire and North Wales. We'll be laying a wreath and having a short service of remembrance at each one. Phil, absolutely. Good luck to you, my friend. Try and get some pictures together and send them in to us on a future show I'm doing, maybe Friday or Saturday. We'd love to give them a show on air. Thanks for that, Phil. Right, we move on. Senior Labour figures have been urged to publicly apologise for supporting gun gangster Chris Kaba after he was shot dead by the police. A jury at the Old Bailey took just 3 hours to clear a Met firearms officer of murdering Kaba after a 3-week trial. But In the days and weeks following his death just over 2 years ago, the then Labour MP for Islington North, Jeremy Corbyn, remember him, previously said his thoughts were with Kaba's family as they fight for justice and accountability, quote-unquote. And the Mayor of London, of course, Sadiq Khan, he got involved. He said that, at the time, his heartfelt sympathies remain with Chris Kaba's family, friends and loved ones who are having to come to terms with a young life cut short. And just yesterday, MPs Kim Johnson and Diane Abbott said this in the Commons.
I'd also like to send my condolences to the family, friends and loved ones of Chris Kaba, particularly this week while the media are using racist gang tropes to justify the killing of Chris Kaba.
Nothing could be more damaging for police-community relations than if the idea took hold the police were above the law.
Joining me now to discuss this is former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Peter, thank you for joining me in the studio. They're talking about racist gang tropes, but we know now, as facts of a matter, that Chris Kaba was a gun-toting gangster. So what's she talking about?
Those two statements from Johnson and Diane Abbott are so damaging to the police and the black community relations, because what they do is they make the policing job harder. All they do is sow the seeds of distrust and make a bad situation even worse, not to mention the fact that they are talking complete and utter nonsense. And let's look at Kaba, shall we, whose criminal career began at the age of 13. 13 years old when he was convicted of GBH, grievous bodily harm, with intent, with a knife. And then, a short while after that, he gets arrested for a fray and another weapon used. That time, it was a belt. We then carry on. He gets another conviction. Oh, not to mention, of course, 4 years in jail for possession of a firearm, an imitation firearm. That's not enough. He comes out from that, and very soon afterwards, he gets 5 months for, guess what, failing to stop for a police car and discarding an offensive weapon, a knife.
Peter, you're a straight talking kind of guy. What is the mentality, the mental gymnastics behind those kind of statements we heard in the Commons from Diane Abbott and the other MP? How do they come to the conclusion that the media, Kim Johnson, is using racist gang tropes when the facts of the matter are in black and white? They're there. How do they get to those conclusions? Is it a deliberate intent to stir something up? Is it something else? Can you explain? Do you have any theories on it?
And let's look at that picture that we saw recently of Corbyn with his fist raised and expressing support back in September 22. Quite frankly, they're unhinged, but they're dangerously unhinged, because all of this nonsense that they spout, when they are either unaware of the facts or blind to the facts, pays the overwhelming majority of the black community in the UK a huge disservice. Because guess what? The majority of wonderful, hard-working black people in the UK do not run around with a gun, going into nightclubs and shooting people, and then chasing that same man down the street and indiscriminately firing the gun yet again. They are charges that Kaba, had he lived, would have stood trial for at the Old Bailey and would resoundingly have been convicted.
Well, in the hours after the firearms officer was acquitted of his murder, his family, Chris Kaba's family, said that the only thing the police inflict on the black community is pain. Is there a sense that maybe they need to take more responsibility for their son's behaviour and actions?
I'll put them completely back into the unhinged bracket and I ask the question, how good were their parenting skills? Because look what they raised, an absolute monster who now, fortunately, will never stab another person, will never shoot another person, will never assault another person in other ways, which he also got up to. And quite frankly, the bottom line and the truth is this: the world is a better place without Chris Kaba.
What do you make of this IOPC investigation into the firearms officer, Martin Blake? He could face a gross misconduct charge and even lose his job despite being found guilty of killing Kaba or murdering him.
If that much lambasted, and rightly so, organisation, which is also much distrusted by police officers because it's not regarded as being competent, professional, and it doesn't do investigations in a timely manner.
Should it be scrapped, the IOPC?
It needs a shake-up. It really does. It needs people on there that can actually do the job properly, and it needs to be free of political influence and bias, which at the moment many people regard it not to be so. So if they dare have the temerity to insist on disciplinary hearings for the hero of the hour, Sergeant Martin Blake, then there will be uproar amongst armed police officers once again. I wouldn't be surprised if we have more armed police officers handing in their authorisations, laying down their weapons. If those situations do arise, then my advice to the armed police officers would be this, the ones in Downing Street. Take your weapons to the front doorstep of 10 Downing Street. Lay them down on there, step back, allow the press to take that photograph, because it will go around the world in seconds and we'll get the reform that is needed.
Goodness me. Lots of people, Peter, on gbnews.com/yoursay, absolutely loving what you're saying. Well said, Peter. Couldn't agree more. 100%. You say it as it is. What do you make of Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary's review into firearms officers? Of course, officers now, up until the point of conviction, will be granted anonymity, which, I mean, many people saying, why didn't Martin Blake have that privilege? Yeah. Because he's got a bounty now on his head, not least from other gun-toting gangsters. I
welcome that announcement. Of course, unfortunately, too late for Martin Blake, but credit where it's due. That's the very least that armed officers deserve. And this review into how investigations are carried out and the disciplinary procedures needs to be thorough, needs to be sensible, needs to be grown up, needs to be proportionate, and they need to get it right.
OK. Peter Blakeslee, thank you very much for being with me this afternoon. OK, we move on. Disposable vapes will be banned across England and Wales by next summer to stop our kids from getting hooked. A victory for health, I say so. The amount of times I've seen young children, and predominantly girls actually, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, puffing on these Chinese lithium batteries. You know, goodness knows what's in them, goodness knows what the future health implications are. I'm actually quite happy they're going to be banned from next year. Let me know what you think. gbnews.com/yoursay. I'm Ben Leo, standing in for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
My kingdom for a voice. Scientists have, I can't believe this story, scientists have incredibly recreated the voice of Richard III using both his skull shape and a knowledge of medieval speech patterns. Me neither. The result is that the king, who was famously killed at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, would have spoken in English close to that of a man from modern-day Yorkshire or Somerset. Let's take a listen.
The sun shines with no less light and splendour, nor does it suffer any diminution of its strength.
Let's discuss this further with Yvonne Morley-Chisholm, the voice coach behind the project, who spent 10 years researching how the monarch would have sounded. Yvonne, you can probably see from my face, I have no idea how this works. Can you enlighten me as to what all this is about?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Dawn. So, yes, I had a mad idea 10 years ago. I normally work with actors where we have a recording of a historical person, and we do something called vocal profiling to train the actor who's going to be performing on stage or screen to move their tongue tip, their jaw, their lips, everything, and get behind the personality of who they're playing. We obviously have quite a lot of that missing from Richard. We don't have a recording of him, but I wondered how far we could go. And a key player in this has been and is Professor Caroline Wilkinson, who over a decade ago created his face, first of all, from his skull. Now, on the day we, as Shakespeare would say, shuffle off our mortal coil, every little dent and dimple in the bones says how fit and strong the muscles were. So I thought, OK, we know what his face could do.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney, only on GB News. Andy, you have said on your say, does anyone listen to the confected words of professional victim Diane Abbott? I would say, Andy, yes, because she has been in office for 37 years. She's been an MP. She stormed to victory in the last election in Hackney by a massive, massive margin. So people, surprisingly, do listen to her. John, you've said Peter Bleksley, what an upstanding member of the community, saying the truth as it is. Raymond, good afternoon. You said Peter Bleksley should be head of the CPS instead of the current lot. And Debbie, you've said, brilliant idea, Pete, about laying down your weapons on the steps of number 10. Shame Sir Keir Starmer's never there, though. Too busy flying around the world selling shrimp. There we go. Keep those coming in. Now, the government has confirmed the sale of disposable vapes will be banned in England and Wales from June next year. The crackdown is intended to protect children's health and halt the scourge of plastic littering after 5 million vapes a week were thrown away last year, quadruple the number from 2022. The ban comes as a shocking recent NHS England survey revealed that a quarter of 11 to 15-year-olds had tried vaping, whilst 1 in 10 do regularly, and that's exactly what I was talking about. The amount of times I've seen young kids, boys and girls on trains and in the street just puffing on these vapes. Let's bring in Director of Research and Education at the Adam Smith Institute, Maxwell Marlowe. Maxwell, good afternoon. First of all, let's get our battle stations ready. Do you vape or smoke?
I vape. I know I use nicotine pouches. I used to smoke, and then my best friend's girlfriend told me I looked very ill doing so, so I was frog marched to a shop to buy a disposable vape.
Goodness me. OK, so you are currently a vaper. What's your thoughts on this ban from next year on disposable vapes? Good or bad?
Terrible. Absolutely disastrous. It's totally counterproductive. The whole point of vaping is to get people off smoking. We can come on to the point about children momentarily, but here are some stats and some figures for you. 31% of all vapers use disposables. 56% of those people are, former smokers. Another 20% are, smokers who are trying to come off. So the vast majority of people using disposables are former smokers. The big issue we have is that the law is not being enforced. It is already illegal to sell vapes to children, but there are areas, around London specifically and around the country where trading standards officers, there are too few of them with too few powers to enforce the law. So we have criminals basically going around selling these vapes. Banning them will only encourage them. It's not going to change their behaviour at all.
Well, I would argue that if you've got young kids who are in shops, you see flavours like blueberry, mango, fizz and strawberry, delicious, whatever, popcorn or, whatever you want to call it. So many different flavours of these things. They're marketed almost as sweets. Would you not agree that protecting the health of our young children should be a priority?
Yeah, I totally agree it's a priority, but let's not forget that adults like sweet things as well. That's why if you go to a restaurant, you can order a dessert, fruity flavours. I vape mint, don't vape anything else just because it's a personal preference. Friends of mine,
but these aren't desserts, Maxwell. This isn't a bit of, spotted dick or banoffee pie. We're talking about potentially items that can cause cancer or, at the very least, I admit I have vaped now and then. I haven't vaped for about 7 or 8 weeks. Maybe a social vapor, but when I do vape, I feel it in the gym or when I'm running. I feel it. It does have an effect. I know for a fact it does. So, yeah, of course, we're not talking about desserts in restaurants.
No, I know. I'm talking about flavours. I'm not talking about desserts. We know vaping is not like 100% healthy. It's 95% safer than smoking, and we're trying to get people off smoking. So that's the fundamental public health thing. When it comes to children, and we can come, absolutely, we should discuss this now. Actually, it is already legal to sell to them. The problem is we have essentially parents not taking responsibility, taking these things off children. And in fact, I'd say members of the general public, if they see children vaping, should be saying you need to stop doing it. We just are leaving the law to the police, who are already thin on the ground, and now we're moving to make it an anti-public health measure, because we are failing as a society to enforce social norms, that being children should be nowhere near these devices.
What about the argument that, Maxwell, you've quit smoking? That's great. You know, you've got lots of tar in cigarettes and so on, and carcinogenics, but actually you're still addicted to something. You're still addicted to nicotine. You've not kind of kicked the habit.
Yeah, that's fine by me. If I want to quit, a lot of people say this, I know, but I want to quit. I will. There are lots of resources for free provided by the NHS, even very easy to access, to stop myself from vaping or from using nicotine pouches. I could, go and buy some Nicorette, which is very clinical, from a shop, for example, a pharmacy or any of the high street retailers. I could do that if I wanted. I quite like vaping. I think, nicotine for me helps me think, helps me concentrate. I enjoy it, and I'm going to use my free right as a human being to make that choice. Friends of mine don't vape, don't want to be addicted to nicotine. That's their choice.
Maxwell, do you feel any effects of vaping? If you've been on a night out and you've been sort of caning it particularly hard on the vape, do you feel it the next day? Do you have any sort of instant side effects?
I personally don't know, but I've had friends who do. And, it's up to them to go about and to find out, if they don't want to vape and they don't like the feeling afterwards, fine. I mean, we're all very different people. People have different reactions, but this policy will be a total disaster.
OK. Maxwell Marlowe of the Adam Smith Institute, thank you for joining me this afternoon. There's various studies about the benefits of nicotine. Cognitive enhancement, it can improve attention, memory, learning, fine motor functions, apparently. Various other things can help anxiety, according to some studies. Others say it promotes anxiety. But for me, my big concern is children. I repeat again, because to me it's so shocking. The amount of young kids I've seen puffing on these, and I'll call them Chinese lithium batteries, stupid flavours, blueberry, raspberry, pop and whatever else. It's insane. We need to do something about it. Banning, I'm not so sure, but definitely somebody think of the kids, please. Lots to come in the next hour, but first let's get your weather. I think it's going to be a pretty decent weekend. Back in a tick.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Increasingly cloudy for many of us during the rest of today, with some heavy rain turning up after dark in the west. Meanwhile, it stays drier and clearer to the east as higher pressure slowly pulls away. We've got a southerly airflow. That's a mild direction for the wind, but we're also seeing a steady increase in the cloud coverage across western and later eastern parts of the country. In fact, it turns gloomy in the east, whilst some heavy rain turns up for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest during the early hours of Friday. With that rain and the breeze, it's going to stay mild overnight. Temperatures in some places holding up in the teens. But a murky start to the day, a lot of cloud coverage, some mist and hill fog affecting central and southeastern parts of the country. Some breaks in the cloud, most notably towards Cornwall and parts of Devon increasingly. But this area of rain's moving up through parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts and some tricky driving conditions first thing, I suspect. Some patchy rain into western Scotland and a lot of cloud and some hill fog, but otherwise actually mostly dry, particularly towards the east, where there will be some cloud breaks. But on the whole, it's a cloudy day on Friday, especially across eastern parts of the country where we saw plenty of sunshine through today. Meanwhile, brighter skies emerge towards the southwest, albeit with a strengthening wind and some heavy showers. A slow-moving area of rain moves up through the Midlands, parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. A mild day, but not quite as mild as today because of the thicker cloud and the increasing breeze across some southwestern parts. In fact, the far southwest could see gusts of 40 miles an hour or so. But into the weekend, for many, it's a dry start with some sunshine around. Outbreaks of rain, though, will increasingly affect northwest Scotland.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. We got the usual delays in Perth and Kinross for the M19 northbound at junction 12, the Broxton roundabout. Still got traffic problems on the M62 in West Yorkshire westbound. The exit slip road is partially blocked at junction 26 Chain Bar. Eastbound, the outside lane is closed for emergency repairs at junction 25 Brighouse. There's queues on the M11 northbound in Essex. It's all due to a police incident just before junction 6 for the M25. Queues on the M25 anti-clockwise in Kent just before the Dartford tunnels. Also in Kent, the exit slip road of the M2 westbound is closed for emergency repairs at junction 2 Strood. And slow traffic on the M23 northbound in Surrey. There's a lane closed for a bus on fire just after junction 9 Gatwick Airport. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Day luck. Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News, broadcasting live all across the UK. Sir Keir Starmer's flying into an explosive row over reparations for slavery as rebellious Caribbean leaders are set to force the issue onto the Commonwealth Summit agenda. Will our PM back down and cough up our taxpayer money? Elsewhere, an entrepreneur exodus. The rich are apparently fleeing the country due to what's expected to be a real nightmare of a Halloween budget next week. But Sir Keir Starmer says there's no good reason for them to go. We'll be speaking to a businessman very shortly. And record crossings as Channel migrants making the journey to the UK are expected to surpass last year's total. We're keeping a watch on the scene down in Dover. And this year's Royal British Legion Poppy Appeal officially launches today. I'm wearing my poppy, but do young people take pride in wearing them? Cast your vote now on gbnews.com/poll. Thanks for your company this afternoon. Very much appreciate it. Hope you're well and you've had a good day. A couple of quick emails. Gerard, you said, Ben, food causes more cancer than smoking and vaping. If you find a very old book that's about what is the politics of government, what government allows in foods. I've worked in the food industry for 40 years. The chemicals we eat with our foods is very, very scary. And this is probably one of the worst countries for chemical dieting of our foods. I would maybe argue the US is probably worse for lots of extra ingredients, things such as fructose corn syrup, which is banned in the UK and Europe, but allowed in the US. That's pretty dodgy stuff, to say the least. And elsewhere, there was a very good one. Let me just grab it here. You've said, I think is it Jacqueline? Hi, Ben. I'm a 62-year-old veteran. I served 27 years, recently completed a fine art degree in Blackpool, and in 5 years, I never saw one person at the university wearing a poppy. I was the only one every year. It kind of made me sad. Best regards from, it's Jack in Blackpool. Jack, thank you for that, and good luck with your art degree. Are you still doing it? If not, congratulations for passing. Big 2 hours coming up. Let's get your news headlines first with Sophia Wednesday.
Ben, thank you. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom at 4 o'clock. Child serial killer Lucy Letby has lost her High Court bid to challenge her conviction for the attempted murder of a baby girl. The 34-year-old, who was found guilty of attempting to kill a newborn, known as Child K, was seeking permission to appeal against the conviction, claiming media coverage had led to overwhelming prejudice. However, 3 senior judges in London rejected her application. The nurse is already serving 14 whole-life orders for the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 6 others. Today's ruling marks her second unsuccessful appeal attempt following a similar dismissal in May regarding her earlier convictions. Our GB News reporter Sophie Reaper is outside the court in London.
It started today with Letby's defence barrister Benjamin Myers-Casey taking to the stand to set out exactly what their application was about, and it really seemed to centre around the question of fairness. He said the judge who'd presided over the retrial earlier this year should not have let it go ahead because of what he described as overwhelming and irremediable prejudice. Once all submissions had been made, that panel of 3 judges retired, returning only around 20 minutes later, simply stating right off the bat that they were refusing Lucy Letby's application to appeal. They said they felt the judge was right to find that Letby could have a fair trial.
Now, a 6-year-old woman has been released under investigation after her arrest over the deaths of 3 residents at Gainsborough Care Home in Swanage. Police are investigating carbon monoxide poisoning as the likely cause after Gainsborough Care Home residents were evacuated. 7 people were taken to hospital and 40 others moved to safety during the emergency early yesterday morning. Health and safety officials have now arrived at the scene with a police cordon still in place. The deaths are being treated as unexplained and tributes are pouring in from the local community. In other news, GB News can reveal an imminent rise in Channel migrant crossings, with the numbers expected to exceed last year's total within just 48 hours. At least 400 migrants are anticipated to have made the journey by the end of today, following 5 boat arrivals this morning, carrying over 250 people to the Border Force Processing Centre in Dover. A further 3 small boats were seen heading towards UK waters by lunchtime, taking the number of arrivals so far this year to more than 29,000. The total figure for small boat migrants over the whole of 2023 was 29,437. It comes as reckless people smuggling operations have already resulted in nearly 50 deaths this year. The UK has admitted that the issue of reparations for slavery could now be included on the agenda at the Commonwealth Summit in Samoa. That's despite opposition from the Prime Minister. The government's being pushed to confirm its position on reparations for the UK's role in the slave trade, as Sir Keir Starmer faces mounting pressure from Caribbean nations. Shadow Commons leader Chris Philps says it's wrong to ask for money for very serious sins committed hundreds of years ago. However, the Bahamas Foreign Minister says justice is about more than just money. They say it's about addressing the lasting impact of slavery. Our GB News political editor Chris Hope says it's a ridiculous conversation.
If the cost is anything from 200 billion to 17 trillion, it's clearly a ridiculous conversation. Those figures are far bigger than many times bigger than the amount of money in our UK economy. But if they do look into it further and find a number they can all agree on, that may be a way forward. But of course, as you heard from Nigel Farage, many would say no, no, no. Where does it stop?
Now, Scotland's National Rape Crisis charity is facing turmoil after one of its biggest support centres cut ties over a row about gender and women-only spaces. Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis says it is splitting from Rape Crisis Scotland because their priorities clash over single-sex services, which Glasgow insists are crucial for survivors of sexual trauma. It follows an independent review that found Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre failed to provide women-only spaces for 16 months, leading to the resignation of its chief executive. And the government's confirmed a ban on disposable vapes starting from June 2025 amid concerns about their impact on children's health. The announcement comes as 5 million single-use vapes are discarded each week, with their use growing from over 400% from 2012 to 2023. However, critics claim the move will drive illegal sales, with the Vaping Industry Association warning that there'll be black market surges. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Sophia, and very good afternoon to you. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News. Some breaking news now with regards to these Caribbean calls for the UK to pay billions and billions and billions in slave reparations. So Keir Starmer, despite all your comments on your say, Paul Layton, you said Starmer will flip-flop again. It's in the script. I say, Ben, he will pay up. Sandra, you said if they dare pay reparations, the Labour Party is finished. We can reveal now with our political editor, Christopher Hope, Starmer has stood firm. Chopper.
Yeah, there's been a meeting in the past quarter of an hour in Downing Street with the PM's deputy official spokesman, Ben, with journalists, asked that question on whether the government might move on reparations or find a form of words which will be discussed at the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit in Samoa. We were told this: our position on reparations is clear and remains unchanged. They are not on the agenda at the summit or any sessions. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, remains clear that we should be facing forwards on how we can work with the Commonwealth on current shared challenges. They don't recognise the reports, they say. It remains the case that reparations are not on their agenda, and so it goes on, and that includes other forms of reparative justice. Now, what that means is you've got the UK saying no, some of the Commonwealth saying yes. Who's going to win?
Right.
It's a battle. I mean, they're taking on... The reports are clear. We've heard in terms this interview today with Frederick Mitchell, the Finance Minister of the Bahamas, saying that, you know, it's time that this government, the UK, looked at this, worked out what a figure might be, take it forward. That's not being said by Number 10. So they are holding firm. Maybe Number 10 is listening to GB News viewers. I mean, you never know, Ben. It can happen.
I'm sure they are. With GB News, they're the UK's fastest-growing radio station. I'm sure Number 10 has their eye keenly to the DAB. I mean, this... if they do indeed stand firm, as you're hearing, Chopper, then I guess credit to Sir Keir Starmer. For once, his critics would say he's listening to...
Well, they're saying no at the moment, and they're saying it's not on the agenda. I'm just looking through the quotes again to check there's any way they can get around what they're saying here.
Can we describe it as a slapdown, Chopper?
No, I think it's well, to the demands for it, you can say they're being slapped down, but whether there's a way of agreeing a formal words to look at it for a future meeting, there's all sorts of ways. In the world of diplomacy, there's no final yes or no often, Ben. It can be discussed in the future meeting. But as things stand, they are holding firm to where they have been for the past few weeks. There's no deal to be done on reparations, and how that plays out in the friendly summit. The Commonwealth Heads of Government is not normally one where battles are fought diplomatically. This could be a difficult few days now.
I guess the question is, can the electorate, can the British people trust the Labour Party? They were banging on to Rishi Sunak about plotting to take winter fuel allowances before they got into power. They then did the same thing. They said that they wouldn't tax working people. Arguably, they are planning to at the budget next week. Yeah, well, can they be trusted?
Well, back in the real world, I mean, back in the world we're thinking about, and our viewers and listeners are definitely, is the budget. Now, Rachel Reeves has confirmed they will be rewriting the fiscal rules in a meeting in Washington now. That is really, really important. It sounds very boring, but really important.
What does that mean?
That means that they can find around £50 billion to invest in investment. Briefly, it means they've taken in some parts of borrowing, like the student loan book, which has been kept outside of the fiscal rules so far, into their borrowing calculations. It means that they can raise a lot of money to build more schools and hospitals, roads, this idea of resetting the economy and encouraging more growth. This is the beginning, I think, of the run-in to the budget, an actual announcement about what will be in next Wednesday's session in Parliament.
So are they cooking the books, basically? Are they doing some clever accounting to borrow more money?
They are not cooking the books, and it's not clever accounting, because they're doing this because they know they've got to square off with the markets. If they were doing, as you say, it would trigger, Trussite concerns about the economy. So they're not doing those things. They're finding a different way to look at the debt in this country and the deficit, and using, as I say, mostly student loans in that equation means you can borrow more. It is still borrowing more. I mean, Nigel Farage is still correct. We are still massively in debt. We still pay interest on our debt, the deficit. It's difficult, but this is a way of trying to get the economy... and the gamble they've got is, will it actually trigger economic growth?
OK, yeah, that is the ultimate goal, isn't it, Chopper? Growth, growth, growth. Liz Truss infamously said that was her top priority, but look how that ended up. We wait and see whether Sir Keir Starmer and Labour can be trusted on this reparations row, but Chopper delivering the breaking news this afternoon now that, as it stands, they have, what was the word, no agenda.
It's not on the agenda for this summit in Western Samoa.
There we go. All right. We move on. Thank you, Chopper. The Prime Minister elsewhere has insisted there's no reason for entrepreneurs to flee Britain over fears of a tax raid in the aforementioned budget coming next week. Sir Keir insists investors have confidence in his pro-business government, despite reports the Chancellor will increase employers' national insurance contributions. But with many rich investors threatening to leave the country, is the Prime Minister right to be so confident? Well, let's speak to businessman and entrepreneur Mike Green, who joins me now live. Mike, we heard all the reports about millionaires fleeing the country, going to tax havens such as Dubai and elsewhere. But Sir Keir Starmer today says, guys, nothing to worry about. It's all going to be OK.
Yeah, the problem is who trusts him, who believes him. Even people who voted for Labour do not believe in what Keir says at this moment in time. They said they wouldn't increase taxes or NI. All of a sudden, well, we might not increase it for employees, but employers, you're going to get this. It reminds me of the Tony Blair when he said we won't increase interest rates. And within a week, he delegated the responsibility to the Bank of England, who increased interest rates. There is no trust. And I just want to say, in the last days alone, literally on Saturday, I was speaking at a wealth summit in London. We had tax advisors from Cyprus. I did a podcast last week with tax advisors from Dubai. They have seen a tenfold increase in inquiries from people looking to leave. And it's not just millionaires and billionaires. It's people who are building their wealth, have maybe got wealth in a house, already looking for, how can I get out? Where can I go? And it's happening. It's not maybe. It's not might happen, it is happening. And Keir has driven that almost single-handedly with his team to destroy the kind of hand that feeds them, if you like, to kill the golden goose that pays the majority of taxes in the UK today.
That, Mike, what, is it the politics of envy? And also, specifically, what are people scared of? Is it the mooted raise in capital gains tax on shares, for example?
Yeah, well, if it's not envy, it's stupidity. And, you know, a 12-year-old economics student could tell you that if you tax the people more when they're already feeling pressured and pushed, you know, if, in real terms, a high-rate taxpayer is paying 70% plus in taxes when you look at all of the taxation across the different income and spend that they have. 1%. Contributing 29% of HMRC's revenue, 10% contributing 60% of the revenues. If that leaves or gets dramatically reduced, it's only going to hurt the middle employees, the middle classes who are working really hard. They'll get hurt more by this. It's stupidity. I myself, as an entrepreneur and other entrepreneurs, are really struggling to understand the logic of this. It doesn't make sense on any level to hurt the people that are the biggest contributors to UK income and economics at this moment in time.
Yeah, good point, Mike. But some people would say, I've seen it online over recent weeks, you know, if those with the so-called broader shoulders don't want to help and they want to go elsewhere, then, you know, they say shut the door behind you. But as you said, when they pay and contribute so much towards the total tax haul, it's kind of a difficult argument to swallow.
I get that, Ben. You know, I grew up literally in a caravan and then a council house and shared a bed with two brothers for 11 years and a bedroom till I left home. You know, I don't come from a position of privilege. Yeah. And so I can understand how people who are perhaps not earning a lot think, yeah, tax them. They've got loads. Yeah. But do you know what? They don't have to stay here. It is really easy to go to a different country now. Yeah,
they're so mobile.
With the UK. They're mobile, and you know, these other countries, Portugal, Malta, Cyprus, the Caribbean, Dubai, they're welcoming them with open arms because they know they take their money, their spend, their income, and their wealth with them. Yeah. It's stupidity at its worst.
OK, Mike, great stuff. Yeah, I've always said about capital gains tax, specifically when you're investing, you're basically gambling money on investments, property, shares, whatever, commodities, metals, gold. You're gambling money that's already been taxed, and then the government comes along and says, oh, you've made a bit of money there, thanks very much for that. I think it's outrageous. I can't believe they're even considering increasing that. I think it should be a lot less. But anyway, Mike Green, businessman and entrepreneur, thank you very much for joining me. Let's move on. UK authorities are preparing for a fresh surge in Channel migrant crossings, with the numbers arriving expected to surpass the figure for the whole of last year within the next 48 hours. So brace yourselves. At least 400 migrants are expected to have crossed the English Channel by the end of today alone. GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White joins me now with the latest. Mark, grim, I guess, is the way to describe these figures.
Yeah, and the very latest is about 450 we're now expecting to have crossed by the end of today, because the weather conditions have just about allowed the passing of these boats across the English Channel. So the people smugglers have pushed out significant numbers. Quite a few actually didn't make it to UK waters. They had to be rescued or turned back towards the French coast. But 450 have. That followed 292 yesterday, 149 the day before. And that will, all of that added together takes us to 29,100-ish for the year so far. The total for the whole of last year was 29,437. So we'd be just over 300 away from equaling or beating that total last year. And sources we've been speaking to, looking at the weather patterns out in the Channel and what they're preparing for, the UK authorities believe that within the next 24 to 48 hours, we will have surpassed that number from last year.
And we're just seeing pictures from earlier today, I believe. These are the arrivals, or at least from yesterday.
These are from earlier today.
From earlier today. I mean, we're only seeing a very short clip, but they look like mostly men.
Well, yes, it will be, because 80 to 85% are young single men. That's the demographic. Yes, of course, you get some women and some children in there, but the vast majority, over 80%, are young men who make that crossing. And I've been across in France many, many times, in Calais and Dunkirk over the years, and I've spoken to these people, and unlike those who tell us constantly that these are poor, wretched souls fleeing war zones, some are, that's true, but the vast majority of those I've spoken to over the years are people that, yes, are still leaving fairly, poor and impoverished countries, dysfunctional governments. They want a new and better life in the UK. They wouldn't necessarily qualify for asylum as such, but the problem is that many of them come from countries where it's deemed by our law too unsafe to send them back to. So even if you don't get asylum, the vast majority of people still get leave to remain in the UK. Same result.
And do you know what? I don't blame them. Economic migrants, who wouldn't want a better life? They see the land of milk and honey in the UK. They want a better life for themselves and potentially for their families back home. You can't blame them. But the problem is, when you don't know who these people are, they're throwing their passports and phones into the Channel. You don't know their background. We've had various cases of that chap from, double murderer in Siberia, who ended up killing a British lad, was it in Bournemouth? Yeah. That's the problem. When you don't know who they are, that is the issue.
Yeah, there have been countless examples, actually. The Hartlepool murder that took place last year, linked to the war in Gaza, a terrorist attack carried out by an asylum seeker, the stabbing of a group of gay men in a park in Reading a few years back, again linked to an asylum seeker. There have been multiple examples over the years of the potential for people who are asylum seekers to go on and commit crime. Now, of course, other people will argue that, well, lots of indigenous white people go on and commit crimes. That's true. But, they have a right to be here. They've been brought up here. We're bringing people, or allowing people to come to the country that in some instances, go on and commit crime.
Indeed. I always say to people who suggest that, yes, but that's our problem. That's our native problem. Why, when you have an issue with your own country, would you import problems from elsewhere? I mean, yeah, smashing the gang's going well then, Mark.
Well, this is the thing. This is a grim milestone for Sir Keir Starmer, who made it his policy to concentrate on actually going after the criminal gangs, but far from reducing and smashing the gangs and stopping the flow of people coming across the channel. Where are we? We are now going within 24 to 48 hours to be ahead of where we were for the whole of last year.
OK, Mark White's our Home and Security Editor. Thank you for that update. Let us know what you think on that grim milestone. gbnews.com/your say. Coming up next, trans charity Mermaids have been told to take down false claims on puberty blockers on its website. Former Tory MP Miriam Cates, who called for an investigation into the charity 2 years ago, and she's done some sterling work holding them to account. She joins me live next. I'm Ben Leo, in for Martin Daubney on GB News. Back in a tick.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
3 incredible young people from Essex are planning to become the youngest people ever to row, not sail, row, across the Atlantic Ocean.
It's about for 3,000 miles.
It is.
Give or take.
Almost exactly that, Sam.
The 3 flying fish, so-called, consists of Anna, Dunk, Harry, Alan and Rowan Daly, who are preparing to row that 3,000 miles across the Atlantic. It would be the second largest ocean in the world. And the trio are aiming to do that challenge in support of the Teenage Cancer Trust.
Well, I'm very pleased to say that Anna and Harry from the Flying Fish join us now. Very good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
I think the two of you are bonkers, but brilliant. Absolutely incredible what you're doing to raise money for Teenage Cancer Trust. Why did you want to do this?
So our third person, Rowan, his friend actually died. So when he was in secondary school, I believe, one of his peers passed away, and Teenage Cancer Trust supported them and their family a lot. So it was definitely the right charity. Yeah, it was.
Absolutely awful. So you wanted to do something to raise money for teenage cancer. Why rowing?
So my dad did it in 2021.
The trip, the Atlantic trip?
Yeah, he rowed it as a pair. Where we live in Essex, they actually build the boats there. So we used to cycle round there past the boatyard, and he got interested and actually did it. He was the first year after COVID. And one night, we all met in the Air Cadets, so one night after Air Cadets, Rowan actually dropped me off home and the boat was outside. We were obviously waiting to get it sold. And I think he was asking some questions, and we stood there at my porch and went, Rowan said, I reckon we could do that. And I was like, yeah, I reckon we could. And then we brought Harry on board, and that's kind of how it all came together.
If people are watching and they want to support you, do you have a
GoFundMe
GoFundMe
we've got
page
social media platforms at
Right.
The Free Flying Fish. That's Facebook, Instagram and TikTok, and our GoFundMe links in all of the bios on there.
Fantastic.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney on GB News this afternoon. Some emails have arrived. Stephen, you've said, just looking at your pictures of migrants being brought into Dover today, I simply cannot begin to understand how any government can allow this to continue. Are they allowing it? They'd suggest that they're trying to smash the gangs, whatever that means. But I personally find it quite canny that this is happening all over the world. Look at the southern border in America. Millions and millions and millions of undocumented illegal migrants flooding the country. Look at Italy. Look at Europe. It all seems very coordinated. Is it a coincidence? Steve, you've said our glorious Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is still saying we'll smash the gangs. The woman couldn't smash an egg. Who knows on Yvette Cooper's cooking kill skills, Steve. Maybe she can scramble an egg or two. Any more? And Janet, you've said, have the Commonwealth countries not gained anything since slavery? Might have to dig into my own history to see if any of my ancestors were part of the white British slaves of the 17th and 18th century. Yeah, thanks for that, Janet. OK, let's move on. The transgender charity Mermaids gave chest binders to children as young as 13 against the parents' wishes and wrongly claimed puberty blockers were reversible. That's according to a new report by the charity watchdog. An inquiry into the charity was opened in 2022 when Miriam Cates, the former Tory MP, led colleagues in the Commons voicing concerns about the charity's behaviour. Take a listen.
Over the past week, serious safeguarding failures by the children's charity Mermaids have come to light. Revelations that the charity sent breast-flattening devices to young girls behind their parents' back, promoted harmful medical and surgical procedures to children, hired a trustee with links to paedophile organisations, and a digital engagement manager who posted pornographic images online, including of himself dressed as a schoolgirl. For years, despite whistleblowers raising alarm, Mermaids have had unfettered access to vulnerable children. Does my right honourable friend agree that it has taken far too long for these concerns to be taken seriously? And does she also agree that it is high time for a police investigation into the activities of Mermaids and its staff?
All right, well, I'm delighted to be joined by Miriam Cates. Now, Miriam, good afternoon. Great to see you. Give us your thoughts on this development. You've done some sterling work holding them to account in recent years. We saw the clip there from your time in Parliament. Some arguing now that it's time for Mermaids as a charity to just simply be shut down.
Well, that would certainly be my preference. And you saw in that clip I called for a police investigation. This is actually a charity commission investigation that was sparked by many, many complaints, not just from me, but also many parents who complained to the charity commission. And although the recommendations about removing misinformation about puberty blockers and other things have caught the headlines, actually the report is really a whitewash. It's about whether or not Mermaids has complied administratively with charity law, which of course is important, but spectacularly misses the point, which is the fact that this is a charity that promotes gender ideology to children, that tells children they're born in the wrong body, that sets them on a route to perhaps medical, surgical sterilisation, and was implicated in the Tavistock scandal. So, unfortunately, although the Charity Commission, of course, has its own job to do and is assessing Mermaids against charity law, this is really just a slap on the wrist from an administrative point of view and does not get to the heart of the issue.
Miriam, just kindly remind us of the situation involving, was it their previous CEO who had some paedophilia links? Mermaids had to get rid of them quickly, but can you just explain what happened with that?
It wasn't the CEO, it was a trustee who had been found to have given a lecture at a paedophile adjacent organisation, essentially, which was discovered, I think, by the press. Mermaids did sack this person once that was found out. But of course, the fact that this person could have been employed in a children's charity without the due diligence taking place is just shocking. And I think, again, if you read the report, it's full of whether or not Mermaids complied with various different administrative duties, but it completely fails to acknowledge the safeguarding risks of having a charity that's working with children, that's talking about gender identity and sexuality, sending breast binders to children behind their parents' back. These are complete safeguarding failures that aren't picked up in the report at all, and it's really just about whether or not the Commission was managing whether the charity was managing its affairs correctly. So, of course, it's good that the Commission has highlighted some inconsistencies in the charity, but again, it really does not get to the heart of the issue. And the problem is that in our law, because of the Gender Recognition Act and the Equality Act, the law basically accepts that a man can become a woman for legal reasons. So it's very difficult to say that Mermaids are acting illegally, because actually there's lots in our law, sadly, that does almost accept gender identity ideology. So really, we've got to change the law. Once the law is clear that men can't become women and boys can't become girls, then we can start to crack down on these organisations that spread this very harmful ideology.
Miriam, just briefly, because we're pushed for time, is the Charity Commission fit for purpose?
Well, the Charity Commission has to assess whether a charity follows the law in terms of its finances and its management. And you know, I think it does that. But what's very disappointing is they haven't picked up on the safeguarding risks associated with Mermaids or taken it any further. And I do think that is very disappointing.
OK, Miriam Cates, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Just to provide a statement from Mermaids, the chairman of trustees, Catherine Downs, said the Charity Commission had confirmed, as we have repeatedly asserted, that we have not provided medical advice or acted improperly in our work with children, young people and their families. So there we go, make your own mind up. Lots more to come in the next hour and a half, but first, let's get your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. It's 4:32. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. First, some breaking news. It's understood that Rachel Reeves will change the government's fiscal rules in next week's budget to allow her to increase borrowing for public investment by around £50 billion. Speaking to several media outlets today, the Chancellor said her fiscal rules would ensure that debt fell during the course of this Parliament. Britain's borrowing costs rose today in anticipation of Ms Reeves' decision to rewrite the UK's debt rules, with the spread between British and German borrowing costs now at its widest for over a year. Child serial killer Lucy Letby has lost her High Court bid to challenge her conviction for the attempted murder of a baby girl. The 34-year-old, who was found guilty of attempting to kill a newborn child known as Child K, was seeking permission to appeal against the conviction, claiming media coverage had overwhelmingly prejudice. However, 3 senior judges in London rejected her application. The nurse is already serving 14 whole-life orders for the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 6 others. Today's ruling marks her second unsuccessful appeal attempt following a similar dismissal in May regarding her earlier convictions. In other news, a 6-year-old woman has been released under investigation after her arrest over the deaths of 3 residents at Gainsborough Care Home in Swanage. She was detained last night in Dorset on suspicion of manslaughter, with police exploring carbon monoxide poisoning as a key line of inquiry. The victims, 2 men aged 74 and 91 and an 86-year-old woman, were found dead on Wednesday, and their deaths are currently being treated as unexplained. And GB News can reveal an imminent rise in Channel migrant crossings, with numbers expected to exceed last year's total within just 48 hours. At least 400 migrants are anticipated to have made the journey by the end of today, following 5 boat arrivals this morning, carrying over 250 people to the Border Force Processing Centre in Dover. A further 3 small boats were seen heading towards UK waters by lunchtime, taking the number of arrivals so far this year to more than 29,000. The total figure for small boat migrants over the whole of 2023 was 29,437. It comes as reckless people smuggling operations have already resulted in nearly 50 deaths this year. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome to the latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Increasingly cloudy for many of us during the rest of today, with some heavy rain turning up after dark in the west. Meanwhile, it stays drier and clearer to the east as higher pressure slowly pulls away. We've got a southerly airflow. That's a mild direction for the wind, but we're also seeing a steady increase in the cloud coverage across western and later eastern parts of the country. In fact, it turns gloomy in the east, whilst some heavy rain turns up for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest during the early hours of Friday. With that rain and the breeze, it's going to stay mild overnight. Temperatures in some places holding up in the teens. But a murky start to the day, a lot of cloud coverage, some mist and hill fog affecting central and southeastern parts of the country. Some breaks in the cloud, most notably towards Cornwall and parts of Devon increasingly. But this area of rain's moving up through parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts and some tricky driving conditions first thing, I suspect. Some patchy rain into western Scotland and a lot of cloud and some hill fog, but otherwise actually mostly dry, particularly towards the east, where there will be some cloud breaks. But on the whole, it's a cloudy day on Friday, especially across eastern parts of the country where we saw plenty of sunshine through today. Meanwhile, brighter skies emerge towards the southwest, albeit with a strengthening wind and some heavy showers. A slow-moving area of rain moves up through the Midlands, parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. A mild day, but not quite as mild as today because of the thicker cloud and the increasing breeze across some southwestern parts. In fact, the far southwest could see gusts of 40 miles an hour or so. But into the weekend, for many, it's a dry start with some sunshine around. Outbreaks of rain, though, will increasingly affect northwest Scotland.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M65 eastbound in Lancashire. There's a lane closed on the exit slip road at junction 8 Accrington for a vehicle having a tyre change. Problems on the M62 in West Yorkshire. Firstly, westbound, the exit slip road is partially blocked due to an obstruction in the road at junction 26 Chain Bar. And eastbound, the outside lane is closed for emergency barrier repairs at junction 25 Brigg House. Queues on the M23 northbound in Surrey. It's all due to a bus fire just after junction 9 for Gatwick Airport. Congestion on the M11 in Essex. It's blocked in both directions for a police incident between junction 6 for the M25 and 5 for Loughton. And we're seeing slow traffic in the roadworks on the M1 northbound around junction 24 East Midlands Airport.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News. Hope you've had a good day. It's almost there, isn't it? Almost the weekend. How's your week been? Let me know. gbnews.com/your say. Now, the Royal British Legion's annual Poppy Appeal has been launched today. This year, the charity is highlighting the mental scars that can result from experiences in military service. GB News reporter Jack Carson has been in Liverpool for us this morning.
Well, the Royal British Legion have launched their 2024 Poppy Appeal today across the country and also here in the North West as well. This year, big focus on mental health, the impact of trauma mentally that a lot of combat soldiers have faced and still experience to this day because of their operations. This year, particularly more poignant because it's 10 years since the end of combat operations in Afghanistan, where more than 450 people and UK military personnel lost their lives. Many of those who survived those combat operations are using the services that are offered by the Royal British Legion, such as the Battle Back Centre, where they can go, receive support and do activities to help them in their recovery from combat. And that support also extends to the Armed Forces families, particularly, as I was mentioning, because of the anniversary that this year is, with it being 10 years since Afghanistan. That is still having a real lasting effect on communities up and down the country, here in Liverpool as well. Earlier on, we spoke to an Afghan veteran who's also the Royal British Legion's Community Engagement Officer here in the city, Stuart Steele. He spoke to us. Here's what he said.
I served in Afghanistan in 2011. It's very recent for families. You know, we've got children who are, who've missed their parents because of that, who are 10, 11, 12, 13 years of age. So that's relevant for today. You know, it's not our grandparents' generations, it's our young generations who will suffer through the loss of a parent or suffer through the trauma of seeing their loved one, their parent, suffer through service. So it's really important to me that we continue this Poppy Appeal, we continue this work and support that we do, and we gain that support and trust of the communities that we serve. And the recent riots throughout the country, for me, myself personally, affected me and took me back to those dark days of Northern Ireland history, and we are here to help them through that mental stress.
You can see there the real impact that Afghanistan and other recent conflicts like Northern Ireland are still having on many personnel in this city and also across the country. That's where the support for the British Legion comes in. That's why having a poppy and wearing a poppy, donating to the British Legion at this time of the year is so important, so they can continue to deliver those services to the people that really need it. Tens of millions are raised every single year just from the Poppy Appeal. But all around this city there are reminders of previous conflict. This is the memorial and statue to the people who died from the Liverpool Cotton Association, both in the Great War and the Second World War as well. More than 350 people from the Liverpool Cotton Association died in the Great War. 2,500 of them signed up. There are memorials just like this all around this city. It's an important reminder of why remembrance is so important at this time of year.
Great stuff from Jack Carson. And yes, indeed, if you want to support our veterans and the Royal British Legion, grab yourself a poppy. We had a choice today. I could have worn one of the traditional sort of big poppies or one of these little shiny badges. I chose for one of these. They look a little bit cooler, I think, a little bit classier. But either way, if you do care about our veterans of past and present, then please get involved and buy a poppy. Right, coming up, clubbing could be extinct by the end of the decade as the legendary Tiger in London's Soho has already shut down. Do you care? When was the last time you went to a nightclub? Mine was, I think, perhaps Ibiza 2018, and I think now you couldn't pay me to get into a nightclub, especially these days when all the revellers are watching gigs, DJs or whoever with their phones, just recording like that. Live in the moment. Live in the moment. Anyway, I'm Ben Leo on GB News. Back in just a sec.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
A furious online debate has been sparked after, well, let's just say a rather large man, I mean, he really was big, was snapped trying to fit into his seat on a plane.
It's led to some to ask whether obese passengers should have to pay for extra plane seats so they don't inconvenience others.
Some say, though, that's cruel. So, should plus-size passengers pay extra for plane seats? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, who's in Stratford-upon-Avon, and the director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, who's in beautiful Harrogate. Good to see you both this morning. Sarah, what do you think?
Well, we've had this debate before with Steve and I, to be fair, and I think it's one of those things where planes are just not fit for purpose anymore. So people's bodies have been growing over the years. We know this, the obesity rates are increasing, etc. But what's happening to planes is the seats are decreasing in size. So they're just not fit for purpose and not fit for the population. So I think it's just one of these things where we need to be more empathetic to people, that they're trying to fit into an environment that isn't shaped for them at all. So I think we do need to kind of say, well, what's right here? Is it the person not being able to fit in the seat, or is it the seat not being fit for purpose for the person? And I think we need to really, look at things from that perspective as well. Instead of thinking the person's doing something wrong, how about the environment might be doing something wrong?
Steve?
It's not about blaming, but the message you can't put out, in my opinion, is that it's okay to be obese and don't worry about it. You see, what I'm saying here is free plane seats. If you're offering free plane seats, an extra seat, that's going to normalise obesity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is,
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the Nighttime Industries Association has issued a warning that the country's nightclub scene is, quote, on the brink of extinction. Joining us now to discuss this is GB News reporter Adam Cherry, who I hope is outside a nightclub. Adam, good afternoon. Is he there? Maybe he's partying. Is he on the dance floor?
I'm actually standing up.
There you go.
I'm standing. Yeah, I'm here. Hello. I'm standing outside a nightclub. That's right. This is Tiger. It's closed after 26 years in operation, and it really tells a story of nightlife across the country, and specifically in London. Now, actually, I went out last night with our camera operator, and we asked people what it's like on the streets of London nowadays when you want to have a bit of a night out and a bit of a boogie. This is what they had to say.
Well, plenty. Licensing, the culture change, business rates, duty on VAT. I mean, there are many problems that we're facing.
I'm surprised tonight it's quite quiet. Catcalling is terrible. Just feels unsafe. I wouldn't walk on my own in Camden.
I've been clubbing since I was 13 and I love Soho. I used to live on this street, Charing Cross Road, and since the Elizabethan line was put in, Elizabeth line, yeah, they've uprooted all the roads, they've changed how it was when I was a young pup, but Soho still rocks me.
Now, I spoke to, you saw them there actually, Ewan Johnson and Sean McCluskey. They're nightclub owners and they're trying to start a new venue up next year. But as they said, the problems are numerous. Business rates, licensing problems with the local council. And Soho specifically, the Soho Business Alliance have written to the Mayor of London demanding that they be involved in the Mayoral Development Corporation, so they're part of Oxford Street's regeneration, to try and save the night out and the night economy, because London is, according to the Times research, the worst place to have a night out, even on a Friday and Saturday, compared to 12 other leading cities. So it's a big problem, and if it's not sorted out, with 150 nightclubs closing per year, according to the latest figures, by 2030 there'll be none left. So it requires some urgent attention and some care.
Wow, Adam, that really would be a very, very sad day. Britain, home to some amazing nightclubs of past and present. I guess for my era, Sankey's in Manchester, that's closed. You had Turn Mills in London, that was a night at Ministry of Sound. Fabric in London is still going. I think the Warehouse Project in Manchester, it would be, you know, I don't party like that anymore. I'd rather sit in with a takeaway and watch GB News. But, yeah, it would be a sad day when they do eventually close. Adam Cherry, thank you very much for joining me. Joining me now is Patrick Christys. Are you much of a raver, Patrick, these days?
I used to be, certainly. Warehouse Project was a bit of me, I'm afraid. But, yeah, those days have gone now.
Too busy holding the government to account, no less. You've got a big show tonight. Who's on?
Massive. Well, it's an eclectic mix tonight. So at 9 p.m, we have Kemi Badenoch, who is obviously hoping to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, hoping to be the next Prime Minister. Really interesting time to have her on, actually, because the latest indication, these are just rumours, are that apparently her team are quite concerned about a narrowing in the polls. And they want to try to get ahead of that. So we're going to be talking to her. The other aspect to it that's quite interesting is that if there was one criticism of her on that televised head-to-head that we did, was that she was maybe a little bit light on policy. Now, I can understand that. She could conceivably be in opposition for 4 years, and there's no point giving the game away now and all of that. So, you know, fair enough. But there are some big news topics around, literally today, and I'm going to try to get her to, you know, say what she really feels about them, basically.
That's the thing, isn't it? We've heard and seen a lot from Robert Jenrick across the media, and he's not shy to give his thoughts on, for example, Chris Kaba and, you know, anything else, the small boats crisis. And maybe I'm wrong, and I've just not seen it, but it seems with Kemi thus far, you've not really had much depth from her.
Well, it's a deliberate thing. It's not as if she's, you know, just going in half-cocked to all of this stuff. That's her tactic. But at some point, I think that's maybe going to have to change. I'm hoping that that changes tonight at 9 p.m, because we've got a lot that we want to talk about with her, so stay tuned for that. We're going to be leading in the show with it. Can I also just quickly tell you about another thing that I've got, which is completely different? It's Les Battersby off Coronation Street, otherwise known as Bruce Jones. So this is a television exclusive. Unfortunately for Bruce Jones, he has just found out that his character, Les, is going to be permanently killed off. Now, he's not appeared on the show for a number of years, but he'd always hoped that he was he's going to be back. He's going to dish the dirt on Coronation Street, what goes on behind the scenes, the wokery of it all, and also talk to us a bit about his interesting life. You know, he was once mistaken for being the Yorkshire Ripper. He was a stripper in the Full Monty, and at the age of 71, he decided to become a wrestler. So it's going to be a lively show tonight.
He was a stripper in the Full Monty. Have you asked him to replicate that tonight?
No, that's my job.
That would, yeah, you've got good experience of that.
Thank you, yeah.
Sounds like a cracking show. And Patrick, whilst you're here, congratulations on amazing radio figures.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
Digits. I mean, across the board on GB News, people are tuning in more than ever, but your show particularly doing well as well.
My show, and crucially, the show of my wife. Yes. Emily Carver, which means that if I do ever get sacked, hopefully we could rely on her income for years to come.
What do you think it is about GB News? Why are people tuning in, not just on radio, but TV more than ever before?
Well, I think it's the fact that viewers feel as though they're part of our community. Genuinely, I enjoy going out and about and people stopping and saying hello to us. I think we're approachable, which is what we want to be. I think they look at us on telly and possibly see ordinary people on the telly, which is nice. And I also think it's the no-nonsense approach, frankly. We go to places that other broadcasters are too scared to go, and we're not too corporate, you know? We do our own thing.
Yeah, I agree. You get stopped in the street, and I have never, not once, had one person come up to me and give me the kind of abuse you and I and everyone else gets online. It's only been ever, thank you so much for speaking out, thank you for keeping me company. And actually, a lot of our viewers, they are perhaps at home for a lot of time in the day, and they love the company, they love the chat, they love the...
I mean, you only have to look at the way the BBC dealt with the Chris Kaba story. I mean, putting that article out yesterday about how, you know, the black community's traumatised by it all, and it was actually just one person who was quoted in the article, and most people were thinking, well, what about the people that Chris Kaba shot, for example? You know, we say it as it is, and a lot of other news outlets don't. I think people see through that. OK, big show coming up at 9 p.m. What's your plan with Kemi? How are you going to approach the interview? Yeah, Kemi Badenoch, we're going to start it off at 9 p.m. And look, I think I'm just going to say to her, look, you know, it's been, you know, she's run a fantastic campaign. She's approaching the end of that now, but we do want some answers about what would a Kemi Badenoch country look like, and we've got a lot of topics out there, and I'm hoping that she is going to finally, you know, come out and actually give us a little bit of detail, which I'm sure she will. So you reckon, Patrick, she is it fair to say she's maybe rattled with the tightening of the polls? Has she got any internal polling? Look, these are just these Con Holmes polling. Look, I'm not going to put words in her mouth about this. It's just a rumour that's doing the rounds on Twitter today, but certainly she's been very approachable with the interview. She's not set any boundaries on the interview. She's not given us any topics or given us a steer on anything. So it is a no-holds-barred interview, and there's a lot to go at. Reparations are in the news today. Chris Kaba as well. I'm keen to see what she makes of, you know, Ed Miliband's net zero nonsense. What would a Kemi Badenoch government do? Would we drill for oil and gas again? Would we do all that? Would she go out and openly say she prefers a Trump government in America to a Kamala Harris one? We've got loads going on that we need to get to the bottom of. I want to know what a Kemi Badenoch Great Britain looks like. Yes, OK. Well, hopefully we'll get some more concrete plans tonight. Tune in this evening, 9 p.m. on Patrick Christys' show, 9 to 11 p.m. Kemi Badenoch is at what time? 9? 9, bang on. And then we've got Les Battersby at a Showbiz exclusive. At 9:30, so it's all going off in that first hour. Great stuff. Look forward to it. I'm going to be staying up for that. Forget nightclubbing, I'm tuning into Patrick's show. Some quick comments. Audrey, you say our country is being sucked of all life and recreation due to inept government, past and present, who have allowed the demise with their big ideas. I think, are you talking maybe about nightclubs there? John, you say Kemi will not leave the ECHR, the Tories are finished. And Dick Dastardly, you say Patrick and Ben are great presenters. I couldn't watch other news channels now. Yeah, good job, keep it up. There we go, Patrick. There we go, Ben. Well done. Thank you for staying with us. Back in a tick, but first, your weather. I think it's going to be a really nice weekend coming up, so get a load of this.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Increasingly cloudy for many of us during the rest of today, with some heavy rain turning up after dark in the west. Meanwhile, it stays drier and clearer to the east as higher pressure slowly pulls away. We've got a southerly airflow. That's a mild direction for the wind, but we're also seeing a steady increase in the cloud coverage across western and later eastern parts of the country. In fact, it turns gloomy in the east, whilst some heavy rain turns up for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest during the early hours of Friday. With that rain and the breeze, it's going to stay mild overnight. Temperatures in some places holding up in the teens. But a murky start to the day, a lot of cloud coverage, some mist and hill fog affecting central and southeastern parts of the country. Some breaks in the cloud, most notably towards Cornwall and parts of Devon increasingly. But this area of rain's moving up through parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts and some tricky driving conditions first thing, I suspect. Some patchy rain into western Scotland and a lot of cloud and some hill fog, but otherwise actually mostly dry, particularly towards the east, where there will be some cloud breaks. But on the whole, it's a cloudy day on Friday, especially across eastern parts of the country where we saw plenty of sunshine through today. Meanwhile, brighter skies emerge towards the southwest, albeit with a strengthening wind and some heavy showers. A slow-moving area of rain moves up through the Midlands, parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. A mild day, but not quite as mild as today because of the thicker cloud and the increasing breeze across some southwestern parts. In fact, the far southwest could see gusts of 40 miles an hour or so. But into the weekend, for many, it's a dry start with some sunshine around. Outbreaks of rain, though, will increasingly affect northwest Scotland.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M90 northbound in Fife. It's partially blocked for an accident at junction 1C Admiralty. Slow for the M66 northbound in Manchester. The exit slip road is partially blocked for a broken down vehicle at junction 4 Simister Island. Queues in the West Midlands. Firstly, M6 southbound has a lane closed for a broken down vehicle at junction 9 Wednesbury. Also, we've got the usual slow traffic in the West Midlands on the M5 northbound to join the M6 at junction 8. Queues on the M23 northbound in Surrey. It's all due to an earlier bus fire just after junction 9 Gatwick Airport, and long delays on the M11 in Essex. It's been blocked in both directions for a police incident between junction 6 for the M25 and 4 the A406 North Circular. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is,
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News with me, Ben Leo, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Breaking news, Sir Keir Starmer refuses to give in to the slavery reparation demands from leaders at the Commonwealth Summit. Has our PM finally grown a backbone? Elsewhere, Nigel Farage tells every Tory councillor in Britain, join Reform now or risk losing your seat, as he says the Conservative Party is doomed. Does he have a point, or is Nigel a little bit delusional? Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, joins me very shortly. And this year's Royal British Legion Poppy Appeal officially launches today. I'm wearing my poppy, but do young people in the country take pride in wearing them also? Cast your votes now on gbnews.com/poll, and I'll bring you the results in a short tick. Thanks for your company this afternoon. Hope you're well and you've had a good day. I want to hear from you in this next jam-packed hour. gbnews.com/your say. Lots going on, including that breaking news delivered by our political editor, Christopher Hope, in the last hour or so, that for now, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has grown a backbone, and he's told those Caribbean colonies that we will not be getting involved in slavery reparations. Can we trust the Prime Minister, though? Can we trust Labour? We heard what they did and said about the winter fuel allowance. We heard what they did and said about not taxing working people. Let me know. gbnews.com/your say. Mega hour coming up. Let's get your news headlines first, though, with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Rachel Reeves has confirmed she will change the government's fiscal rules in next week's budget to allow her to increase borrowing for public investment by around £50 billion. Speaking to various media outlets today, the Chancellor said her fiscal rules would ensure that debt fell during the course of this Parliament. But Shadow Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has warned that Rachel Reeves' actions could push up mortgage costs. Britain's borrowing costs rose today in anticipation of Miss Reeves' decision to rewrite the UK's debt rules, with the spread between British and German borrowing costs now at its widest for over a year. Child serial killer Lucy Letby has lost her High Court bid to challenge her conviction for the attempted murder of a baby girl. The 34-year-old, who was found guilty of attempting to kill a newborn, known as Child K, was seeking permission to appeal against the conviction, claiming media coverage had led to overwhelming prejudice. However, 3 senior judges in London rejected her application. The nurse is already serving 14 whole-life orders for the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 6 others. Today's ruling marks her second unsuccessful appeal attempt, following a similar dismissal in May regarding her earlier convictions. Our GB News reporter Sophie Reaper is outside the court in London.
It started today with Letby's defence barrister Benjamin Myers-Casey taking to the stand to set out exactly what their application was about, and it really seemed to centre around the question of fairness. He said the judge who'd presided over the retrial earlier this year should not have let it go ahead because of what he described as overwhelming and irremediable prejudice. Once all submissions had been made, that panel of 3 judges retired, returning only around 20 minutes later, simply stating right off the bat that they were refusing Lucy Letby's application to appeal. They said they felt the judge was right to find that Letby could have a fair trial.
In other news now, a 60-year-old woman has been released under investigation after her arrest over the deaths of 3 residents at Gainsborough Care Home in Swanage. Police are investigating carbon monoxide poisoning as the likely cause after Gainsborough Care Home residents were evacuated. 7 people were taken to hospital and 40 others moved to safety during the emergency early on Wednesday morning. Health and safety officials have now arrived at the scene with a police cordon still in place. The deaths are being treated as unexplained and tributes are pouring in from the local community. GB News can reveal an imminent rise in Channel migrant crossings, with the numbers expected to exceed last year's total within just 48 hours. At least 400 migrants are anticipated to have made the journey by the end of today, following 5 boat arrivals this morning, carrying over 250 people to the Border Force Processing Centre in Dover. A further 3 small boats were seen heading towards UK waters by lunchtime, taking the number of arrivals so far this year to more than 29,000. The total figure for small boat migrants over the whole of 2023 was 29,437. It comes as reckless people smuggling operations have already resulted in nearly 50 deaths this year. The government's confirmed a ban on disposable vapes starting from June 2025 amid concerns about their impact on children's health. The announcement comes as 5 million single-use vapes are discarded each week, with their use growing over 400% from 2012 to 2023. However, critics claim the move will drive illegal sales, with the Vaping Industry Association warning there'll be black market surges. And it's being reported that Vince McMahon and the WWE have been accused of knowing about and failing to stop the sexual exploitation of young boys by a ringside announcer. In a lawsuit filed on behalf of 5 alleged victims yesterday, they accuse McMahon and his wife and World Wrestling Entertainment of allowing the open, rampant abuse of so-called ring boys as young as 12 who acted as assistants to ringside announcer Melvin Phillips Jr. in the 1980s and 1990s. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Ben.
Good afternoon, I'm Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney, who's on a well-earned holiday. I think he isn't really enjoying his holiday to the full capacity because I caught him tweeting earlier about slavery and Sir Keir Starmer and Labour. So, again, I say, Martin, if you are watching this, get yourself back by the pool. Anyway, breaking news from the last hour. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the UK is, quote, not going to be paying out reparations for the transatlantic slave trade. GB News political editor Christopher Hope joins me now. This is being dubbed as Sir Keir Starmer finding a backbone chopper. Is that accurate?
It's not quite fair, because it's what they've always been saying, Ben. They have been saying in the past, a week ago, it's not on the agenda, we're not going to do reparations, despite the demands from some countries in the black Commonwealth, as you might describe it, rather than the white Commonwealth, which might be Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK. But the line from number 10 in the past hour is this: our position on reparations is clear and remains unchanged. They are not on the agenda at the Commonwealth Summit or in any of the sessions. The Prime Minister remains clear that we should be facing forwards on how we can work with the Commonwealth on the current shared challenges. That's all very well, Ben. The problem is that you have got Commonwealth countries who want to put it on the agenda. We've got a draft of what might be agreed in this so-called communique, the statement agreed by the members of the Commonwealth this weekend, in which they want to see the time has come for a truthful and respectful conversation towards forging a common future, they say. They want to prioritise and facilitate further additional research on the transatlantic trade in enslaved Africans and chattel slavery to encourage and support the conversation as they go forward. What that means is, what's it worth? There's 200 billion at the lower end, 17 trillion the UK is on the hook for 14 countries where we're involved in historic slavery. So a big number there, and many times the actual size of this country's wealth. We're looking into the budget next week, Ben. So there's a big, I mean, it's not going to be paid anytime soon. And Keir Starmer correctly maybe says it's a distraction from dealing with climate change, helping developing countries deal with climate change, poverty. Maybe through our aid budget. You're holding your head in your hands, aren't you?
Well, I just can't believe it. I can't believe the topic is even being discussed. I mean, Britain used something, what was it, 40% of its national GDP, or maybe a lot bigger than that, paying back similar kind of reparations.
That was a loan to pay off the owners of slave lands, and it was paid out finally in 2015.
Yes, so we've already, dug deep, and I'll just mention again, I mentioned it at the top of the show, we were the first to abolish slavery around the world. We lost something like 17,000 Royal Navy sailors sailing the high seas.
On the issue of that loan, that went to mainly white people who owned slave lands, so they were being paid off for plantations they were surrendering when we got rid of slavery. So that money didn't go to black people, I suppose you might describe it. They went to white people.
But
it's not the same.
The argument also is that the slaves were purchased from black sellers as well. So it was their own people selling their countrymen, their native.
And that was raised by Nigel Farage earlier. I think we may have a clip of what he had to say to us. He said, "Where do you stop with this money being paid out?" Let's see if it's there. Sir Keir Starmer say to Commonwealth countries wanting reparations for slavery past?
No, never. Now, there is an argument for reparations, obviously. I think the French, during the 100 Years' War, I think the raids into Kent and Sussex, the loss of so much. I mean, where do you stop with this?
Yeah, I think I and many of our viewers are with Nigel. No, because not least it would probably bankrupt us, which is a good segue to news breaking today, Chopper. That,
yes.
The UK's borrowing costs are set to rise on news that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is meddling or changing to be kind of with the fiscal rules.
We don't know if the borrowing costs are rising yet. We'll see how the market takes this, but the budget is next Wednesday. It's been a 16-week wait since election day. We know from our inbox at GB News TV and radio and on the website how concerned people are. They're concerned about the budget next week because we've been told to be ready for tax increases and spending cuts. We now learn from Rachel Reeves, who's in the IMF meeting of finance ministers over in Washington, that they are going to change the rules on borrowing. So they're dropping the idea that debt must fall as a proportion of GDP at the end of a 5-year period, the current rule, and instead include other things on the government's balance sheet, notably student loan debt. And what that means to viewers and listeners is they can borrow more, maybe as much as £50 billion more, a lot of money, but it must be spent on ways to improve the economy, so roads, NHS buildings and the like. So it's borrowing to invest.
I thought they weren't going to borrow.
They weren't under the old
rule. Am I wrong in
saying
that? I thought
no, you're not wrong.
The election they said we're not going to borrow.
You're not wrong. They weren't under the old rules. They've changed the rules to allow
Was it another porky?
More. It's not a porky because the risk is that the markets won't like it. They've done this with working with the OBR, which gives them some political cover, the kind of economic advisors in the Treasury. So it shouldn't be a trust moment, because what happened, we don't want to go through that again. All our mortgages are a complete nightmare with the interest rates going up. They are doing this carefully, and they hope that the markets won't be spooked by it.
OK. Christopher Hope, our political editor, thank you very much. We wait and see. The big day is what, next week?
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. Goodness me. A Halloween budget, it could be a nightmare on Reeve Street, as we call it. But Sir Keir Starmer today is trying to assure high net worth individuals and businesses, guys, nothing to worry about, we've got this, but we wait and see. Right, sticking with politics, Nigel Farage has written to every Conservative county councillor facing re-election, encouraging them to defect to Reform UK. In his email to all of the Tory councillors up for re-election next May, something like 1,300 of them, he highlighted the risks they could face if they chose to run for the Conservative Party against Reform, presenting the offer as a, quote, lifeline. But how much of a threat is Reform UK? Well, let's ask the former Labour Special Advisor and columnist Paul Richards. Paul, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. What do you make of this? Farage has been saying in recent weeks that it's Labour who is the #1 target for Reform, but it seems he does still have one eye on Tories, not least councillors.
I think he's got both eyes on the Tories, to be honest. I think his big mission is to replace the Conservative Party as the main party of the sort of centre right in British politics. And I don't think he's made any disguise of that. I mean, there are two big stories from the last general election in July. One was obviously the collapse of the Conservatives and the Labour landslide, but the other was the rise of Reform. Very worrying to people like me on the left of politics. But, you know, hundreds of thousands of people voting for Reform, often with no ground game at all just based on media, and often from a standing start in places where they hadn't had candidates before. So that was the sort of the big thrust of this. And, you know, if you look back over history, over 200 years, big political parties do disappear and do get replaced by other insurgent parties every now and again. The Labour Party was that insurgent against the Liberals at one point, and, you know, the Whigs and the Tories and so on. You can look at how it does happen. So
Okay.
he's not wrong to try it.
Paul, our political editor, Christopher Hope, is still with me. He wants to ask you a question.
Hi, Paul.
Always.
Paul. I just wondered, are you surprised that Farage has written to Conservative candidates or at the election next year, councillors, and see if they'll come across, and not Labour ones? 1,352 candidates have been written to by Farage. Because he makes a big play, doesn't he, of how he appeals to disaffected Labour voters too, but he's not going after Labour councillors.
Well, he sees himself as a disruptor, doesn't he? In political terms, he's a disruptor in the same way as Uber or some other company might be seen as a disruptor in the market. And so to go straight after Conservative councillors, and these are not the voters, don't forget, this is the elected councillors, makes the perfect sense. It's going to cause absolute mayhem, and it may well work. I mean, he may well pull a few of those Conservatives away from the Conservative Party and get them to defect. It will certainly cause a lot of disquiet. I mean, the timing, you know, we haven't got any local elections coming up. This is timed absolutely to coincide with the final stages of the Conservative Party's leadership contest. And to just, you know, remind everyone that he's out there snapping at their heels. So you can understand, it's just as a stunt, but it's not actually. There's a lot more going on under the surface, I would say.
On that point, though, is it Sir Farage saying, look at me, and is that what he's up to here, or is that a real thing? He told us earlier he has had some replies already. There's a bespoke email inbox if you want to defect, probably defect at reform.uk or something, who you get back in touch with. I mean, is it just attention-seeking behaviour or real?
Well, I think, as ever with Nigel Farage, it's a big dollop of both, isn't it? I mean, he is an attention seeker. He is a grandstander. He is something of the showman. But underneath this is the shifting sands of our political system. And like I say, it was backed up by real votes in real ballot boxes at the last election. And arguably, there are quite a few Labour MPs who owe their seats to the fact that Farage's party Reform split the vote locally with Conservatives. And so, you know, it is, for me, a worrying trend, and for him, obviously, it's an opportunity.
Paul, it's Ben Leo again. Ben. Reform going after the Tories, but Labour have their own problems on a local level. I think there's been something like 20 seats contested in the by-elections earlier this month. Labour lost 4 of them, of the 11 they were defending, not least in my neck of the woods down south. The electorate already fed up with this Labour government after just 100 or so days.
I think it's too soon to make that conclusion, Ben, but I do accept that there's been a certain amount of churn, and these kind of local election results are canaries in the coal mine, in the sense that people are obviously showing they're a bit annoyed with the government, and you can see that in the opinion polls as well. I mean, I think there'll be a phase of this because of these difficult choices. You know, the budget is going to be a tough call next week, and that will probably be unpopular with lots of people too. So I think there is going to be this churn of seats at a local level. I mean, Labour's strategy is, of course, to put the groundwork in now, and then have a narrative arc that leads us up to an election where you can say, look, things have got better and they'll get better still if you stick with us. And that's what Labour's message will be at the next election. For now, though, it's going to be pretty tough going for them.
Yeah, indeed. OK, Paul Richards, thank you for your company this afternoon. Now, the Royal British Legion's annual Poppy Appeal has been launched today, and this year the charity is highlighting the mental scars that can result from experiences in military service. Joining me now is military veteran and former member of Special Forces, Matthew Hellier. Matthew, good afternoon. The focus this year, the British Legion say, is on the mental side of veterans' experiences. We, of course, know the physical turmoil they can experience. Is that a good place to focus their attention? Is it kind of underlooked, the mental effects of doing tours and serving for the armed forces?
Yeah, it certainly is underlooked. It's becoming more paramount with all the veterans and all the celebrities now getting behind the mental health of everyone, not just servicemen. And the Poppy represents not just the RBL, the Royal British Legion, but it represents peace, it represents the future, and it represents every veteran that has fought for this country, and it's celebrated all over the world.
Do you think we do enough for our veterans? I look at places like America, where they are treated with so much admiration and respect, both serving and, former armed forces personnel. Have we got some catching up to do you think, in this country?
We've got some massive catching up. When you go to the States, every event you go to, you get discount. We are desperately trying to come on board and get in line with the States. But our veterans are the reason why we're here, the reason why we have freedom of speech and we have a democracy in this country. They need to be represented better. They don't need to be hounded through the courts by the MPs. They need to be put on a pedestal, and they need to be celebrated. And this is one way we can celebrate them, by wearing a poppy on November the 11th and remembering why we're here and what sacrifices they made for us to have freedom of speech and just be here with our families.
And just finally, Matthew, we had a poll running today about whether viewers think young people care about wearing a poppy. What's your take on that? Do they? I suggested most of them probably wouldn't even know what it's about.
I'm going to tell you now. If you go to Flanders Fields, every child through nursery or junior school needs to visit Flanders Fields. They will see the sacrifice that these young men made so that they could have their lives. And until we start doing this, it needs to be back in the curriculum. It needs to be, it's something we need to be proud of, but it's something we need to be aware of, and it doesn't happen again. That's why the poppy's here. That's why veterans volunteer for our amazing forces, to maintain peace. But every child needs to visit Flanders Fields and see the ultimate sacrifice that goes on.
Hear, hear. Matthew Hellier, thank you very much. And thank you, Matthew, for your service as well and your company this afternoon.
God bless.
OK, let's turn our attentions to France, where Gisèle Pelicot, who was sedated and raped by her former husband, she's spoken out in court for the first time today. I'll be joined by the journalist who witnessed it firsthand and who has been tracking this case step by step. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's a huge financial and mental strain for parents, but we have this system now where it talks about they bringing a family member to help, but I don't think that's happening a lot of the time. I think people are having to be off work, look after their child, and often, sorry to say, but their school always calls the mum, and then you have this situation where you have nobody to look after your child. People's grandparents don't seem to want to do it so much, and often family members aren't just down the road. So what we have is no village. And I think it's really important when you have a child that you need that village.
Are children getting more sicker than they used to be? Or is it just that we take the odd sniffle a bit more seriously now since 2020?
Yes, I do think the odd sniffle can be. I know in my school they say 3 days away, you know, the slightest little thing, and it's like...
If you have a cold?
Yeah, no, please, go in, yeah.
And 3 days off if you have a cold for a child, and we wonder why all these parents aren't at work. I think some of these figures about people who could be working and aren't working, they're not necessarily on benefits, but some of them will be people who, during the pandemic, particularly parents, decided to get a different work-life balance. They quite liked being at home, and they realised the children are benefiting from it. Do you think those people are in these statistics, Annette?
Of people staying at home with not working?
Who decided to not go back to work of working age?
Yes, I think a lot of people don't want to go into an office anymore either. They've had that little bit of freedom and they're like, I'm not going in. And I know employers are trying to get them to go in, but they just want to be at home. They want to be near their children if their children are sick, whether that's the mum or the dad. And also a lot of people don't live near their office or wherever. They don't want to commute. Train fares have gone up, so they say, well, why should I pay? So you have this whole knock-on effect throughout the economy.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, let's turn our attentions to France, where Gisèle Pelicot has testified in court, saying she's a completely destroyed woman as she questioned how her husband could have betrayed her. This is the shocking case which has gained much media attention, involving the retired electrician Dominique Pelicot, her husband, who in a decade-long campaign, unbelievably, drugged his unsuspecting wife so that he and dozens of men could rape and abuse her while he watched and filmed them. It beggars belief. Mrs. Pelicot said she decided to testify so she could, quote, speak for all victims. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the senior global reporter at the Mail Online, Nick Pisa, who's been following the case step by step. Nick, just a simply awful case. Some of the detail I've been reading is, you know, just unbearable to digest. A truly courageous and brave woman, to say the least.
Absolutely, yes. Good afternoon to you, Ben. Yeah, she could have kept this all behind closed doors. She didn't have to waive her anonymity. She could have kept the public completely in the dark about what happened. But as you said in your introduction there, she's decided to waive her anonymity, come out, be named, and happy to be photographed as she enters the court in Avignon, because she says she wants to give voice to victims of sexual violence all over the world, and not just in France. And as she said yesterday, when she stood up absolutely so bravely, I mean, you just couldn't help admire her courage and her dignified presence yesterday in court. She said that she was there for all the other victims, and she said if Madame Pelicot can stand here in full view of everyone without hiding behind a screen or anything like that, then other victims can also step forward. She said that it's not us, the victims, who need to be ashamed, it's the perpetrators.
Yeah, poetic words. Nick, you've just got back today from France. You were in court, you were in Avignon. What is the defence from some of these defendants, those accused? I mean, some have said, yeah, I did it, but there's been quite bizarre explanations from other men.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we should say that a few of them have admitted to their part in this rape, in these rapes of Mrs. Pelicot, but others have completely denied it and said that they thought that they were taking part in some sort of bizarre game, some role-playing game, with the approval, with the consent of Mr. Pelicot and his wife. They also say that, hold on a minute, if Mr. Pelicot is there whilst this is taking place, then consent has been given. Surely, I don't see any problem, and they are denying rape, and that's what they're holding on to. And then we heard this morning from Mr. Stéphane Bonhomme, the lawyer from Mrs. Pelicot, from Madame Pelicot, saying that this defence was just absolutely ludicrous and society should just not listen to it at all, and it should be inaudible, his quotes were, to society, to any normal thinking society.
Oh, goodness me. I mean, in total, 49 men are accused of rape, 1 of attempted rape, 1 of sexual assault, 5 others also accused of possessing child abuse imagery. When does the trial run to, Nick? When's it expected to conclude?
Well, it started on September the 2nd, so almost 2 months ago now, and we expected to finish with a verdict on around about December the 20th. And the maximum sentence that all these men could face, including Mr. Pelicot, who we should say actually at the very beginning stood up and said, I am a rapist, just like everyone else in this courtroom, all the other accused, in this courtroom, and they all face a maximum of 20 years in prison. But what this case has done is really kick-started a debate in France amongst women. As you can see from your pictures there, every time Mrs. Pelicot walks into the court, she's greeted with warm applause by well-wishers. She's given flowers. You're looking there at her former drama teacher, actually, who turned up in court yesterday to support her. He gave her an orchid, and there are posters on the walls outside the building which are fully supportive of Madame Pelicot. They say, one, for example, which I saw yesterday, said, Gisèle, the women of France, thank you.
Wow. Nick, I'm really lost for words, but just an unbelievably grim and sad story. But if there is one shining light to take from it, it is the bravery and the courage of Gisèle Pelicot, who is, she's 72. You know, the testament to her. Keep us updated when you're back in France, Nick, with the court case. We'd love to hear from you again. Thank you for your company this afternoon. Wow, unbelievable story. I always used to question whether I believed, in good and evil. I questioned, especially as a youngster, does evil exist? And unfortunately to say that during my career as a journalist, there are some stories which just emphasise the fact that, yes, evil does exist. I think monsters walk the earth, and that gentleman, her husband, who perpetrated those awful crimes against his poor wife, just proves the fact. Anyway, we move on. There's lots more to come between now and 6 o'clock, including Reform UK Deputy Leader, Richard Tice, joins me as the leader, Nigel Farage, asks every Tory councillor to defect to their party. Is he onto something? 1 or 2 have defected overnight. I'm going to be speaking to Richard Tice on that and lots more in just a tick. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 5:30. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Rachel Reeves has confirmed she will change the government's fiscal rules in next week's budget to allow her to increase borrowing for public investment by around £50 billion. Speaking to various media outlets today, the Chancellor said her fiscal rules would ensure that debt fell during the course of this Parliament. But Shadow Chancellor Jeremy Hunt warned that Rachel Reeves' actions could push up mortgage costs. Britain's borrowing costs rose today in anticipation of Miss Reeves' decision to rewrite the UK's debt rules, with the spread between British and German borrowing costs now at its widest for over a year. The UK apologising for its role in the slave trade is not on the agenda. That's according to Number 10, as the row is engulfing the Commonwealth Summit. Sir Keir Starmer remains clear that we should be facing forward amid mounting pressure from Caribbean nations. Shadow Commons leader Chris Philp says it's wrong to ask for money for very serious sins committed hundreds of years ago. However, the Bahamas Foreign Minister says justice is about more than money. They say it's about addressing the lasting impact of slavery. Our GB News political editor, Chris Hope, says it's a ridiculous conversation. Now, child serial killer Lucy Letby has lost her High Court bid to challenge her conviction for the attempted murder of a baby girl. The 34-year-old, who was found guilty of attempting to kill a newborn known as Child K, was seeking permission to appeal against the conviction, claiming media coverage had led to overwhelming prejudice. However, 3 senior judges in London rejected her application. The nurse is already serving 14 whole-life orders for the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 6 others. Today's ruling marks her second unsuccessful appeal attempt, following a similar dismissal in May regarding her earlier convictions. And a 6-year-old woman has been released under investigation after her arrest over the deaths of 3 residents at Gainsborough Care Home in Swanage. She was detained last night in Dorset on suspicion of manslaughter, with police exploring carbon monoxide poisoning as a key line of inquiry. The victims, 2 men aged 74 and 91 and an 86-year-old woman, were found dead on Wednesday, and their deaths are currently being treated as unexplained. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2951 and €1.1987. The price of gold is £2,105 and 77 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed the day at 8,269 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there, welcome to the latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Increasingly cloudy for many of us during the rest of today, with some heavy rain turning up after dark in the west. Meanwhile, it stays drier and clearer to the east as higher pressure slowly pulls away. We've got a southerly airflow. That's a mild direction for the wind, but we're also seeing a steady increase in the cloud coverage across western and later eastern parts of the country. In fact, it turns gloomy in the east, whilst some heavy rain turns up for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest during the early hours of Friday. With that rain and the breeze, it's going to stay mild overnight. Temperatures in some places holding up in the teens. But a murky start to the day, a lot of cloud coverage, some mist and hill fog affecting central and southeastern parts of the country. Some breaks in the cloud, most notably towards Cornwall and parts of Devon increasingly. But this area of rain's moving up through parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts and some tricky driving conditions first thing, I suspect. Some patchy rain into western Scotland and a lot of cloud and some hill fog, but otherwise actually mostly dry, particularly towards the east, where there will be some cloud breaks. But on the whole, it's a cloudy day on Friday, especially across eastern parts of the country where we saw plenty of sunshine through today. Meanwhile, brighter skies emerge towards the southwest, albeit with a strengthening wind and some heavy showers. A slow-moving area of rain moves up through the Midlands, parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. A mild day, but not quite as mild as today because of the thicker cloud and the increasing breeze across some southwestern parts. In fact, the far southwest could see gusts of 40 miles an hour or so. But into the weekend, for many, it's a dry start with some sunshine around. Outbreaks of rain, though, will increasingly affect northwest Scotland.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Lancashire on the M65. The motorway is partly blocked eastbound from junction 9 to 10 towards Burnley, where a lorry is on fire. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, it's down to a single lane westbound from junction 30 to 29 towards the M1 at Lofthouse. A car's on fire. Everyone's been funneled into the outside lane past the scene. It's taking about an hour to get through. On the M1 in Derbyshire, the inside lane's blocked off southbound at junction 29, the Chesterfield-Mansfield exit, where a lorry's broken down in the roadworks. On the M11 in Essex, long queues northbound. One lane still shut from junction 5 to 6 just south of the M25. A police investigation is underway. And the M5 in Devon, we're just hearing, is blocked northbound from junction 29 to 28 north of Exeter at the scene of an accident, causing long delays on local routes. London Overground train suspended. Surrey Quays to New Cross. There's a passenger incident at Wapping. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney, only on GB News. Now, Nigel Farage has written to every Conservative councillor facing re-election, encouraging them to defect to Reform UK. He's called the offer a lifeline for councillors who could risk losing their seat to his party. Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, joins me live now. Richard, good afternoon. First of all, let me ask you, why would...
It's working already, Ben. It's already working. It's amazing.
How many?
It's fantastic.
Give me numbers. How many?
We've got people from Essex to Scotland to the Midlands. Some have come over today. Some are coming over in the next few days, because you've just highlighted the key word, which is lifeline. And these are great people who are real Conservatives who feel they've been completely and utterly abandoned by the wet, woke One Nation bunch that is really the sort of the mainstream of the Conservative Party.
But Richard, if you listen to Robert Jenrick, he's sorting that out. He's pledging to leave the HR. He's even talking about mass deportations, which you guys seemingly are afraid to do. So the question begs, if the Tories are sorting themselves out, as Robert Jenrick pledges to do, and if he is elected leader on November the 2nd, I think it is, why would they bother going to Reform?
Well, if you follow the betting markets, he's not got a Scooby-Doo of a chance. And look, you can't out-Farage. That is the key point. And I think people have realised that you just can't trust the Tory leadership. They say one thing and then actually consistently over years and years, election after election, have done just exactly the opposite. So up and down the country, councillors are looking over their shoulder and they're saying, actually, I'm a real Conservative. I agree with reform policies. It's time for me to show some courage and move on over. And this is a precursor to the May elections next year, when we're going to be standing in thousands of seats across England. And we've got a cracking chance. I think we're going to win hundreds and hundreds of council seats. And it's just another significant step in the sort of growing momentum that Reform has.
Richard, how are you going to be quite frank, how are you going to ensure that lots of these councillors and lower-level politicians aren't just, as we saw in the UKIP days, there were handfuls of them, just a bunch of nutters who would cause you a lot of problems?
Ben, you're seriously not calling Conservative councillors a bunch of nutters, are you? I mean, the Conservatives are better for them.
There were some back in the day. There were some moving to UKIP back in the day, not just from Tories, but we're talking about vetting.
Of course, we recheck and re-vet, and vetting is something which is, it's like an MOT, it's valid at the point you vet, and then obviously people have got to continue to behave. So, but people understand that it's very important to, to be behaving and using social media in a sensible and proper way.
OK, Richard, obviously you're a new MP. You've been in and around Parliament and the Commons for a couple of months now. Let me get your thoughts on this interaction from Kim Johnson MP and Diane Abbott about Chris Kaba yesterday. Take a look at this.
I'd also like to send my condolences to the family, friends and loved ones of Chris Kaba, particularly this week while the media are using racist gang tropes to justify the killing of Chris Kaba.
Nothing could be more damaging for police-community relations than if the idea took hold the police were above the law.
What do you make of your parliamentary colleagues, particularly saying that the media were dishing out gang tropes about Chris Kaba?
Well, I was in the chamber at the time and I spoke immediately after those two honourable members, and I expressed my clear support and that of Reform UK for the brave frontline police officers and Martin Blake, the sergeant, and his family. That's our clear point. And I asked the Home Secretary, does she still have confidence in the Independent Office for Police Conduct and the Crown Prosecution Service, given that even the jury wrote a letter to the judge they wanted read out, but the judge ridiculously refused, expressing astonishment as to why this case got to court. They dismissed it quite rightly in 3 hours. And we, the public, Ben, have been completely gaslit. If we had been told the truth, as opposed to having a cover-up about the violent, gun-toting, stabbing, fearsome gangster that Mr. Kaba was, if we were told that early doors, you wouldn't have had the community attentions, you wouldn't have had the protests.
Yeah, but Richard...
And you wouldn't have had that ill feeling. And that's really important, and we have to learn the lessons from this.
But, Richard, that's how we do it in this country with criminal trials.
Yeah,
you have a jury of 12 that can't be influenced by previous criminal history.
I don't accept that. We have to learn the lessons. If we don't learn, we will continue to have misinformed, violent protests when actually the truth is very different. So we have to learn the lessons and be prepared to change things. We don't always know best in this country.
But Richard, is the truth having any effects? Because we know the truth now about Chris Kaba's history. He was a gun-toting gangster.
And we should have known that day one.
And yet, Richard, we've had people...
We'd be in a very different place.
But we've had MPs, the clip I just showed you, Kim Johnson, Diane Abbott, other people on the Chatterati online, still defending him, even in light of the fact of his crimes.
And they look completely and utterly ridiculous, don't they? Because tens of millions of British people support the brave firearms officers. And the reality is that we now see from the video evidence and from the computer evidence that Mr. Kaba was putting those police officers trying to arrest him in serious, grave danger, attacking them, ramming them with his car, trying to evade arrest. And he was in a car that was involved in a firearm incident the night before.
Yeah, OK, I just can't accept the argument that we need to know about his previous criminal... jury, anyway, needs to know about his previous criminal past. Of course that's going to influence someone's decision.
We can agree to disagree, but unless you're basically saying you're going to cover up the truth, you're going to misinform the public, and therefore you could potentially have a police officer charged with murder and all that entails. He's got a price on his head.
Yeah.
I think we need to learn some lessons, and I think we have to be prepared to do better and show continuous improvement.
Yeah, I think it's outrageous that that firearms officer was named. I think it's ridiculous. As you said, there's a 10k bounty on his head. Anyway, lastly, Richard, unfortunately, we've revealed today on this channel that migrant crossings across the English Channel are about to surpass last year's total. So last year there were 29,437 crossings. In the next 24 hours, we're going to surpass that. What's your reaction to that?
Well, look, I mean, sadly, these crossings will continue and the deaths will continue. This is tragically a record year for deaths. Babies, children, women are dying crossing the Channel because our current Prime Minister, like the previous Prime Minister, hasn't got the guts and the leadership and the courage to do what he's allowed to do under international maritime law, which is to pick up and take back. The moment we do that, this whole thing stops within 2 or 3 weeks, and that's the only moment at which these deaths will stop. And our Reform UK policy is the kind and compassionate policy that will stop this disaster.
What about smashing the gangs, Richard? How's that going?
Well, I keep asking the Home Secretary how long she's going to try her policy of smashing the gangs before she gives up and accepts the Reform UK policy is the only valid policy that will work. She refuses to answer the question. And that's because the truth is she's got no idea. I mean, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, at some point, they're going to have to capitulate. They're going to have to stop the deaths and pick up and take back. And actually, of course, France have a legal obligation to do that under international maritime law, which they're in breach of.
So you keep mentioning this maritime law. What is it? The UN Convention on Laws of the Seas? How would Reform do it? What is it?
It's the 1982 UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, as well as the 1974 Safety of Life at Sea Act. I've read both of those treaties. Pretty dry old read, but I know the exact clauses under which we've got the ability and the legal right to do that. And frankly, if we were running a show, that's what would happen.
OK, just finally, in a word or two, Richard, who would you rather see, who would Reform rather see win the Tory leadership race? Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick?
I don't care. I don't think either of them will be their leader at the time of the next general election. All
right, I thought you'd say that. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, thank you for your company this evening. OK, coming up, we'll be discussing the legacy of British shot put record holder Geoff Capes as he unfortunately dies at the age of 75. I'll be joined by one of Britain's strongest men. Stay tuned. Back in a tick.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm going to see your show, Behind the Shoulder Pads, one night only at the Adelphi Theatre, October the 22nd. You're talking about your extraordinary life. Stage, screen, published author, 19
TV,
books, TV, most important.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who's managed to straddle, 7-8 decades in showbiz and still be at the top?
Yes, I was thinking about that the other day because somebody said, you know, the last good. There is a Shirley MacLaine.
Sure.
She started the same time as me.
Right.
Sophia Loren.
Yeah.
She started around the same time.
She's not working much, though.
It's true, she's not, but she's still out there being, you know, a major icon. And of course, people like Dick Van Dyke, who's just almost 100.
Yeah, he's incredible,
you know,
isn't he?
I'm a mere babe next to him.
Yeah, you are. But and I was thinking about, you've written some extraordinary, wicked, waspish diaries, which of course you can because you've worked with so many people. Look at the names: Frank Sinatra, Lana Turner, Elizabeth Taylor, Dean Martin, Gregory Peck,
Richard Burton,
Paul Newman. The list goes on
Gene Kelly,
and
my
Gene
favourite.
Kelly. Was he your favourite?
Yes.
Why?
Because I saw him in a movie when I was a little girl called For Me and My Gal with Judy Garland, and I just fell in love with him. It's such a cute movie. Well, they don't make movies like that anymore. And then I was lucky enough when I first went to Hollywood at age 20 to meet him and literally hang out with him and his friends. And then I put him in a movie with me that I produced. He played my husband in a movie called Sins. And he was wonderful. He was really wonderful.
The People's Channel.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is,
who's going to pay it? Budget Day, all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. At GB News, we love to hear, of course, what you think every day. So we're running our poll of the day. And today, we've been asking you, with the launch of the Royal British Legion's annual poppy appeal, do you think the young take pride in wearing the poppy? And the final results are now in. Just 14% of you say yes, you think the young do take pride in wearing a poppy. A whopping 79% said no, and 7% said you don't know. For all our latest polls and info on how to vote in the future, just go to gbnews.com/poll. I would suggest, and again, a complete generalisation, I may be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, I would suggest the young, especially maybe teenagers, probably don't know, the majority don't know what the poppy's for. I don't think we do enough to educate kids in this country about the poppy, etc. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, just a generalisation. Right, Jeff Capes, the British shot put record holder and two-time world's strongest man, has sadly died, aged 75. Jeff competed for Team GB at 3 Olympic Games, won 2 Commonwealth titles and was recognised in the England Athletics Hall of Fame. For more reaction to his death, I'm now joined by former Britain's strongest man, Terry Hollands. Good afternoon, Terry. Thank you for joining me. Your first reaction, of course, to his sad passing. Was he a bit of an icon for you?
Yeah, I always say it was one of my earliest childhood memories. I'm aging myself a bit here, but one of my earliest childhood memories was watching World's Strongest Man, seeing Jeff Capes on the TV, sitting down with the family at Christmas. And yeah, I can clearly remember as a 4-year-old boy watching him win his first title.
And he became a bit of a household legend after his initial track and field career was over. He starred in the massively popular Superstars TV programme. It attracted something like 10 million viewers an episode. And, of course, he went on to win World's Strongest Man in, was it 1983 and 1985? Just tell me about the process of getting to that level, the training involved and the diet, of course. What kind of feat did he achieve there?
I mean, it's an absolutely incredible feat. And obviously he was around in the infancy of strongman as a sport. And obviously he was a bit of a pioneer in terms of that, because now we sort of understand how to train for it, stuff like that. And he was one of the people that was a real trailblazer in the sport, you know, learning how to do everything. He didn't have the years of experience like we do of knowing people doing these events. He was really sort of training for it and sort of figuring it out as he went. And obviously, for him to sort of be as incredible as he was as an athlete, then winning World's Strongest Man on TV, and really brought strongman into the households nationwide. So it was something that I fell in love with, and he really was the pioneer of the sport for us in this country.
If you don't mind me saying, you look like you're still training now, still lifting pretty heavy and eating well. How's your own schedule going?
Yeah, I'm still trying to. I mean, I'm sort of now working behind the scenes. I don't compete anymore. I just recently retired a couple of years ago. And obviously, I owe a lot of my career to Jeff Capes. I certainly wouldn't have had the career that I did. I competed at World's Strongest Man 15 times. And I wouldn't have had that career and all those years of enjoyment without the sort of legacy that he left. And yeah, I mean, I'm still training. It's not something that'll ever leave me, but obviously, yeah, we all sort of owe a debt of gratitude to what Jeff Capes did within the sport.
Just so our viewers get an idea of what's involved in winning the World's Strongest Man, can you just tell me, for example, how many calories you were eating a day, what kind of food groups, and also your training schedule, Terry?
Yeah, I mean, it's training most days. Believe it or not, most of the guys do some cardio as well. You actually have to have a reasonable level of conditioning to do the events that we do, and obviously massive size and massive levels of strength. So it's a lot of mainly sort of gym work and some event training, actually practicing the events, some conditioning work for those events. And then in terms of the food, it's a lot of calories. I can honestly say, I'm not sure the exact number when I was in the peak of my career, but I would imagine it was well in excess of 10,000 calories a day. Obviously making sure you're getting plenty of protein, carbohydrates, fats. I mean, generally, it's like a diet that most people would eat, but just a lot of it is huge volume. So it's not necessarily bad quality food, which makes getting 10,000 calories even more difficult. It's a very tough thing to do.
OK, Terry, thank you for that. Appreciate it. I think I feel like texting you after the show and getting some gym tips or something, because I could do... I'm pretty good cardio-wise. I've got a mean 5K under my belt, but I could arguably use a bit more mass.
No problem at all.
There we go. Terry, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Yeah, sad news about Jeff Capes. He, you know, as I've mentioned there, a great track and field career. Then he went on to do great TV work. As I mentioned, 10 million viewers tuning into that Superstars TV series. And then going on to win World's Strongest Man twice. No mean feat. Right, that's me done for today and for the week. Martin Daubney isn't back tomorrow. I think perhaps it's Dawn Neeson who is covering. Martin's back on Monday, and I'll be back tomorrow night covering Patrick's show. Thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate your company and your comments. Have a fantastic evening and indeed a good weekend if it starts tonight. Cheers.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Increasingly cloudy for many of us during the rest of today, with some heavy rain turning up after dark in the west. Meanwhile, it stays drier and clearer to the east as higher pressure slowly pulls away. We've got a southerly airflow. That's a mild direction for the wind, but we're also seeing a steady increase in the cloud coverage across western and later eastern parts of the country. In fact, it turns gloomy in the east, whilst some heavy rain turns up for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest during the early hours of Friday. With that rain and the breeze, it's going to